بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the current episode of Islamic Book Review Podcast with myself, Muhammad Nadad, and our esteemed permanent fixture, Maulana Dr. Zishan. And today is going to be a bit of a long session, and we're going to see where it goes, inshallah ta'ala. We're going to discuss a number of topics, and the first topic on our list is to do with current events, especially in the UK, where the law firm, a specific law firm, has now put in through a legal case to remove a particular organization, beginning with H, Hamas, from the proscribed list of terrorist organizations, according to the UK government. So I want to bring Dr. Zishan into this. What do you think is the significance of this case here?
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli wa nusallim ala rasulihi al-kareem. Amma ba'd. So, the reason why I want to talk about this, because if you recall, it's been now well over a year, much more than a year. We recorded 3 podcasts. For those who haven't seen them, we kind of reviewed around about 15, 16 books and then articles, etc., talking about a range of topics related to the Israel-Palestine conflict.
All of which have been uploaded on the Telegram channel.
It's on the Telegram channel as well.
Yes.
It's on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So I would advise people to go check that out. And not just for the, there's one thing that I speak about. You can listen to that's fine. But, I would just say it gives them, for those who are stuck over that, what kind of material to read, you can just kind of fast forward through that and then you can see content that's relevant to you. But the third episode we did, which spoke specifically about the history of Hamas. So the second half of that, if you remember, it was called What's to Do with Hamas? Mm-hmm. So we spoke specifically about 2 academic works, one by Azzam Tamimi and the other one by Tariq Bakoni. And so the purpose of that was not, as we were very clear there, it's not to support Hamas, which is a proscribed group. Proscribed group means a terrorist organization. Any support for a terrorist organization in the UK is you're breaking the law. So we're very careful to basically present what academics have said about the history of Hamas. And why is that important? Right? What was the significance? And we can move on to this. Why is that significant? I want you to come into this discussion as well, inshallah. Is that how I perceive of the discourse is that it's not about whether you want to go and support Hamas. The thesis that we were putting forward was that on any metric, if you remember this argument quite clearly, right? Any metric you want to put up in terms of moral and ethics that make Hamas evil. So we're going to accept every accusation you put against them. Right? Every accusation you want, we say, okay, all right, they want to perform genocide, they want to kill civilians. One is in terms of theory, human shields. And then not only that, like, look how many civilians they've killed, look at the rockets and whatnot, right? The rape and whatever. Put all of it together and we're going to say, Sami'na wa ta'ina, that we hear and obey. This all happened. You put all of that together, it's still, on every single one of those metrics, it doesn't stack up to the evilness of IDF. Mm-hmm. So if you want us to accept that Hamas is a terrorist organization, so we say, okay, no problem. But at least then, do justice here and refer to the IDF as a terrorist organization. Because if you're looking at, let's say, how many civilians have been killed. So if we go by any estimate of 7th October, whatever, to give us the highest estimate or highest number you want of civilian casualties.
So it was 1,500, the
highest. But then let's divide away from what they're telling us were military targets from civilians, right? So that's whatever it is, right? Yeah. You go with that number. So you want to go either via the sheer number, so how many civilians are killed just by number, or even by ratio between civilian and combatants. Mm-hmm. Right? In both of those, the evilness of IDF is far greater. Mm-hmm. If you're talking about sexual crimes, right, the established sexual crimes on Palestinian prisoners is far greater than anything that Hamas are said to have done on 7th October. Mm-hmm. If you're looking at occupation, there's no occupation done. I mean, the invading of Hamas, which lasts on 7th October for a day, is nothing compared to the 60, 70 plus years of occupation, the brutality. So, and then we also say even the rhetoric. So one was, you had the Hamas Charter, and we said, let's accept the Hamas Charter as in being engraved in stone, and this is their charter, this is what they said. But then you go look at the rhetoric from those who have power, right? And the great difference, and then the evenness of that rhetoric. That doesn't even, because the sheer number of it, and that's why when you look at the South African claim for genocide against Israel, they kind of bring all those together, and the sheer number of those statements throughout the Israeli government. So on any spectrum you want us to look at it, that was the general theory there, the thesis of the argument there.
That was the argument mentioned by Dr. Finkelstein as well, quite a lot in this last conflict. He was mentioning it a lot on talk shows, etc. So that's where I remember it from as well. And it's interesting that is always, that's the thing that's mentioned, because when we're talking about comparisons, that is the main talking point between when pundits and commentators always mention a comparison between, look at these Arab, Muslim, barbaric people as compared to the civilized, westernized, democratic, liberal Jewish people. And that comparison is always made with overlooking and glossing over the fact that in practice, what is called civilized, democratic and liberal, they're often much more evil than what we see as barbaric.
Yeah. But I'll add something here, right? Is that when we're talking about the... so one was, we said we accept all those facts. The other purpose of the podcast was to say, all the accusations that are made, what's the reality of the movement? Like, what do they have to say for themselves? So those two books were kind of looking at, when you look at the 1988 charter, and if you remember the argument from Azzam Tamimi, he said that this was made at a time where most of the Hamas officials were in prison. If you remember the Ahmed Yassin story of his son, who's 16-year-old, that was beaten in front of him to gain a confession. So all of this was happening at that time during the first Intifada, right? You have during the first Intifada, the breaking of the bones, which is known to don't kill them, but break their bones over the Palestinians. So within that, you have the Hamas charter that comes forth, which is very harsh in the rhetoric, which is often cited.
Which makes it a reactionary 100%, document.
Yeah. But then what we also mentioned was that in 2017, there was a revision of the charter. And not in the revision of the charter, throughout the 30 years, again, this was just factual, because we were citing not from our sources, it's not a personal conversation with any Hamas official, but in mainstream academic works, where you have numerous times where Hamas accepted that we were okay to go to 1967 borders, have a 30-year Hudna, which is a treaty, and then we'll take it from there. But we're not going to recognize your existence. Why? Because we still morally accept that you've stolen this land. So the 67 borders is what we were willing to have a treaty on. But the other land, we still remember how that was occupied, which was our homes and so on and so forth, right? Now, did they use what we know as means of terrorism in the 90s? Yes, you had suicide bomb attacks. And so the military wing of Hamas, which is the Qassam Brigade, did do that. And we said, look, that's factual as well. We're not trying to hide anything. It's not to pretend that there's not a history behind that. But it was to explain that there's more to Hamas than is usually presented as just saying they're Nazis, they're evil, they're bloodthirsty. And then all the stories that many of them have been debunked of, that they cut off the breasts of women and they were playing football or something with them. And then there was gang rapes and just trying to show the sadism of of Hamas.
Much of what we heard at the beginning of this conflict.
And still carries on.
Yeah.
It's not stopped.
Yeah.
Right. We still hear it there. And the purpose behind that is that, and this is where I want to get to my argument. I want you to hear, I don't think I've said this to you, I'm not sure, but I want you to hear your thoughts on it. Just before I came here, I've been listening to so just to know the date, it's the 11th of April, right? So things change rapidly, so it's always important to mention the dates when we're saying something. So 11th of April. So yesterday, there was a podcast debate between Douglas Murray and Dave Smith. I don't think you've seen it yet.
I don't think I've seen it, but I think I've seen it.
It just came out yesterday, right?
Okay.
So I listened to most of it. And a lot of the pro-Palestinian voices, whether it's the US, whether it's in the UK, or in the West in general, so they're doing great work. So don't get me wrong. I'm not here to kind of criticize these voices to say, because many on the left, maybe not even Muslim, right? And they are doing great, much more than what I'm doing and what we are doing in terms of we had a few little podcasts here and there. We say, we boycott some stuff and But so there's people that are on the front line, no doubt, doing debates, have done a lot of khair, a lot of good for the ummah, putting those voices out there, debating it. But one of the issues that I found in these debates was that when you come into the debate and you work off the premise which a lot of pro-Palestinian voices work off, which is that Hamas, terrorists, evil, Nazis, death cult. Right? They'll be like, yeah, we accept that. And then the debate goes on about Israel. Is that also a death cult or not? Mm-hmm. So what's happened is when you go into the debate, we've already conceded that this is evil. Now the debate is whether Israel is also evil or not. Mm-hmm. What happens then is that even if I win the debate, the conclusion is that both are evil.
Yes.
Right? The premise should begin is that we accept that the occupier is evil. Mm-hmm. Now we should say that is the resistance, to what degree is it evil or not?
The framing of the debate is already skewed.
Yes, it's not to say that they're not evil, you don't have reservations, etc. You say, okay, but it's a resistance movement, and let's take the resistance movement seriously in terms of what actually has happened. Mm-hmm. So when we have examples like in 2005, they were voting, okay, and then they threw rockets, and then when they threw rockets, then when the blockade started, then Hamas threw more rockets. In each one of those, there's detail there of exactly how why the rockets were thrown, right? Was it because of some sort of aggression from Israel? Was the blockade done deliberately to starve the population, or not starve, but at least keep them on a diet? These kind of languages that were used, right? Yeah. So then these were retaliation. The prisoners that we hear about, and the one that the people always forget, and sometimes we fall for it, is that the West Bank and Gaza is both Palestine. So you can't say that, oh yeah, but the settlements, illegal settlements, is happening in the West Bank, not in Gaza. So anytime there's an expansion of settlements, which has not stopped, even by 2005. So in Douglas Murray's argument, he constantly makes this, and what happens, I found, good on Dave Smith. If anyone hasn't seen it, I would say have a watch of it. And Dave Smith has done a lot of good. I don't think he's ever listened to this, but I would, if anyone doesn't know him, and a few people that listen to us, I would say, can you please just send this segment to him at least, right? For some reason, I'll tell you why, inshallah. Is that when the debate starts, every time he says, then Hamas just threw rockets, and then Hamas want to hide in homes, and so they want to get a maximum amount of kills as possible, and basically dehumanize them. Not, again, there's one thing saying that we disagree and it's terrorism, no problem, but to dehumanize them in the sense that there's no rational process behind here. So the whole act is just vicious violence.
Yes.
And then the whole way Dave said, yeah, I agree, yeah, they're difficult, I agree, difficult, but then you're trying to explain why Israel is also bad.
It becomes a who's worse game.
Yeah, but you already conceded.
And you already conceded once bad.
Right. So then the person in the middle is saying, oh, so they are that evil. So, okay, I get why Israel want to attack them like that, right? Or why they might go a bit overboard. And then they'll say, and if there's an Israeli, I don't think, Douglas Murray, I don't understand where his support for Israel comes from. He's an atheist, all right? A homosexual atheist. I don't think how well it'll be accepted in more of the Orthodox Jewish societies. But whatever the case, he has this kind of, no, Israel can't do any wrong. And then maybe they might concede saying, yeah, maybe that wasn't wise.
They might have made a mistake someplace.
Might have made a mistake someplace. So, this is a reasonable guy, because these guys are evil, but that's, a reasonable position to have.
Yeah.
So you allow the framing of the discussion. Now, I don't know what you think about that, honestly.
So I think
explain why I can justify this position.
Yeah, so I think this kind of framing has done a lot of damage in terms of trying to understand the actual conflict and the history of the conflict, because it's, as you mentioned rightly, that it frames the debate from the outset. And this is something which, in the sensationalist kind of media, like Piers Morgan, etc., that's how he would frame the debate with all of his talk show guests. He would say, this October 7th was bad, but is Israel justified in what it's doing now? So now he's reframing the debate to say they are justified, but how much, to what extent can they be justified to do as much as what they're doing? To what extent can they retaliate? So it then reframes that, okay, Israel is justified automatically now, and the talk show guest is forced to accept that.
Yeah, and if you do start a discussion, if anyone wants us to do a starting point, it's not like going right to the first Zionist and say in 1970 the Balfour Declaration. You can do that if you want, right? But I'm saying is if you want to have a meaningful discussion about, because whenever we have a conflict, right? So let's say me and you have a conflict, then we have to go to the earliest factor which is directly related to this conflict. right? So if I have a complaint and say, I want to go find out your great-granddad, right? What did he do? Well, if it has no direct, or if it does a relation, but it's too far now, we go for direct relation to our current conflict. So you can say, yes, the 1970 Balfour Declaration, but everyone there is dead now, right? So those who signed it, it's important. We've spoken about it here, but I'm saying is, what's the most key factor to the whole current debate? It has to begin with occupation, right? So when you want to have a discussion, we say, yes, we'll speak about 7th October, we'll condemn whatever we want to condemn, but can we first start with the premise that is the occupation illegal? That's international law. Even people like Piers Morgan will accept that. If the occupation is illegal, if something is an illegal occupation, can that be militarily fought against? If you say yes, you say no, then you say, well, that's international law. If you say yes, okay. So now our debate is, how can that how can that be fought? And
the debate gets flipped on its head.
Then the debate gets flipped on its head. Then we can say, yeah, okay, we condemn this way. So can we accept the fact that if 7th October was done differently, let's say it was just military targets, is that now justified? All right, would you say that's militarily okay? Then we can have a debate, because we're framing the discussion not the way we want it, the way a discussion should be framed. Right? And so that's how these discussions have to have in a meaningful way.
This is why I would say, like for me, this is why the significance of this case is so great.
100%. Now coming back to this, so now we get that. Why is this significant? Because a lot of the arguments that we made in that episode, which I do think because of the term Hamas, I think it was cut in the algorithm, right? I don't think people got to, because compared to other episodes, I think that was kind of, you have
to put asterisks in the A.
Right.
For you to not get picked up.
Okay, so it does seem like that, because it's quite strange. But it was, but whatever the case. But the thing the issue was that the arguments we were mentioning were from other groups. So, from other papers, other articles that were talking about the conflict about Hamas for them. This is a legal document now. And our advice, so people ask, what to read, what should we do, etc., 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 right? Well, I think not to support. Again, none of this is about supporting Hamas. It's about being on the side of historical accuracy.
And truth.
On truth. So whether you're a Muslim, whether you're a non-Muslim, that's why I said, forget me. If you can get this information to people like Dave Smith, or those people are there that can sit and read this, I thought it was actually like a 50, 60 page document. I just got through, started reading it this morning, and it's huge, about 600 pages, right? And it's just the way, so I'll put the link up. And they have various types of documents, some like the charter, the renewed charter. So a lot of the arguments we had made, where the 2017 charter, you have now Hamas themselves saying, yes, there was harshness in that. You have Hamas here saying that anti-Semitism is an evil. You have Hamas now saying clearly that it's not against Jews that we have a war, it's against the occupation we have a war. You have Hamas explicitly saying that we're not, like they actually mentioned, we're not like Daesh. They say it in here. This is not me saying, I'm just quoting them saying, they're not like Daesh, they're not like ISIS. We're not, even though that the US and Britain are part of the genocide, right? They are part of, we know this, but none of us are planning to attack or anything against you guys.
It establishes itself as a purely nationalist kind of organization, interested in its own kind of internal issues as opposed to external.
And if you remember something, which I found quite interesting, was that even like specific points that we kind of highlighted, which was, again, it was quite difficult because we're quoting from other sources. I would say, okay, but that's you saying that from an academic source. What have they said? So one of the points, I don't know if you, I'm trying to think if I did say it or not, but it was a interview of Yahya Sinwar, who was killed a year ago now, right? So it was an interview from him from a while back. I remember I saw this clip. And the only reason that and in that clip, he was asked about, why do you target?
Yes.
Was it in the podcast? I can't remember.
We mentioned it. I think I showed you it.
You might have,
Yeah. It was the one where he's on a wheelchair.
On Vice News.
Yes.
That's the one.
They're asking him, why do you target? He said, our war is not with the Jews.
Yeah.
It's with the Zionist entity and occupation.
And then something else you said there, right? So now if you go to I'll send the link, because it's called the Riverway Law Firm.
Yes.
So Riverway Law Firm are the ones that are putting this case forward, the legal case forward. And the legal case forward is from Hamas. They're doing a pro bono, so they can't take money for it because they're a terrorist organization by law. So you can't take money if it's a pro bono. They're going forward and they're going to put this case forward from Hamas. Now, all the documents and research they've done, they've put it online. So what I would say to people that are interested in this, just for the sake of truth, just to understand their perspective, Doesn't mean that they're not terrorists, or doesn't mean they're not doing terror, whatever it is, right? Just to understand their perspective, take some time out and read some of the documents. Now, out of the documents I would advise to read is that, and again, all the links we put up, inshallah, is a part which is called, which talks about the Operation Tufan al-Aqsa. This flood. Operation, the Aqsa flood. This is what the document is called. And in it, it talks about the background behind this, the 7th of October. Why it happened, why they did it. Again, you can turn around and say they're all liars. They're making it up, right? But at least read it to be clear of what that perspective, meaning, are we just talking about bloodthirsty criminals? Or is it that they are putting forward an argument that at least be aware of what their argument is? And the argument is, so it's not to say that this makes them good. It's to say that let's now compare those arguments to Israeli propaganda. And let's go back into the question of, yes, you want to, let's say most likely the UK would reject this petition. And we can get back to saying the terrorist organization, no problem. But it will still it will further enhance our awareness of how and why certain things are done. So on the Yahya Sinwar point, in the documents, this is not me saying it's in the document, they actually cite that Vice News piece. And they say the following in the actual piece itself. So he's asked that on numerous occasions, okay, so they write, they call him Martyr. So the Martyr Yahya Sinwar gave an interview to Hind Hassan of Vice News in which he discussed these efforts. So meaning the idea of violent resistance, where we tried non-violent and violent resistance. We tried it. We know that we don't want to wage war. This is a quote now, the translation obviously. We know that we don't want to wage one war or fighting because it costs lives and our people deserve peace. For long periods of time, we've tried peaceful resistance. We expected that the international community, free people and international organizations will stop the occupation from committing crimes and massacring our people. Unfortunately, the world stood still and watched as the occupation war machine killed our young people. Then, end quote, then he says, Yahya Sinwar was then asked about alleged war crimes committed by Hamas through the indiscriminate firing of his rockets into Israel. He responded, Israel, which possesses a complete arsenal of weaponry, state-of-the-art equipment and aircrafts, intentionally bombs and kills our children and women, and they do that on purpose. You can't compare that to those who resist and defend themselves with weapons that look primitive in comparison. If we had the same capabilities to launch precision missiles that targeted military targets, we wouldn't have used the rockets that we did. We are forced to defend our people with what we have, and this is what we have. What are we supposed to do? Should we raise the white flag? That's not going to happen. Does the world expect us to be well-behaved victims while we're being killed? For us to be slaughtered without making a noise? That's impossible. We decide to defend ourselves with whatever weapons we have. End quote. Right? And I was just saying, if you read through it, the purpose of this is just to kind of understand what the nature of the petition is about. So we can be far more well-informed of what the dynamic of this is. And before, because I was kind of making this, putting this to the forefront, now you don't need to go through this academic work. You've got an official document by lawyers that have put it up in English and actually filing a petition in UK courts. So what I would say to everyone is take some time out. For those on the pro-Palestinian cause, just understand the perspective, not to go and support, but just to be aware of what the dispute is and understand their side. So in your debates, you can actually have a more nuanced way. So all these type of things that are happening, you can say, oh, this is the actual background to it, or this is their perspective of it. And does their perspective make sense here? Does it not make sense here? Should they have been more cautious? Do they have more agency? Do they have less agency? You can have those arguments, but be well informed. And this is what that's quite.
And I'll just add to that the outcome of this case, if it does result in a positive result for Riverway, all right, and they are able to remove, get the US in the UK government to remove Hamas from their proscribed list.
It's a political wing of Hamas, right? Because the Qassam Brigade were already put on the Hamas. This is a political wing.
The political wing. If they're able to do that, then the outcome of that will be it will force everyone to be, or it will allow everyone to be able to have a much more meaningful discussion in the way you're saying. Yeah,
because the thing is right now when we converse, it's not that, because like I said, we are always on the side of for justice.
Yeah.
Right? But then when you put certain barriers in place,
restrictions on the discussion,
or for freedom of speech, just because we talk about just to have a free discussion. So for example, the current UK policy is that Russia are the aggressors against Ukraine. That's the current the Western narrative. is that. Now, I don't have knowledge to say to the contrary, but that's the Western narrative. But you see many voices out there that are willing to challenge authority and say, no, right? It was the West, it was the US that were provoking Russia with expanding NATO. They're poking at Russia. There's all these statements, and then you come back and you debate it back. And so what it does is it allows us not to become pro-Russian, but it allows us to say, oh, here's what the facts are. So there is a provocation, but does a provocation justify invading Ukraine? We can have that debate, and that debate is happening.
You move on to the justification on a much more deeper understanding of the actual context, because you're able to discuss both parties.
Exactly. But then if you say, well, Russia now is a terrorist state, and so we can't have that discussion anymore, it does two things. Number one is that when you try to stifle conversation, you then start to get the more extreme voices, because it's no longer going through an avenue of debate. So if I, for example, would say, like, you say, well, you can't have that position, you can't support that position. So those who are inclined towards it are not allowed to have a public debate. You can't go and say, well, this is their arguments. You tell me why they're wrong, or I think they've got a point here. If you don't allow them to do so, then I'm going to have my points amongst my fellow who agree with this in secret, and then we'll start to fester up extreme positions. This is actually something that is in the document. It's what I found quite fascinating was in the document, they talk about that anti-Semitism is an evil, and that the stifling of pro-Palestinian voices through the garb of claiming that it's anti-Semitism is actually increasing anti-Semitism. It's here. Meaning they have that awareness of this point. And if you were to go and speak to many people in the US, for example, and even the UK or in the US, they would accept that, because what happens is when we are told that you can't say that Israel, will run the US, right? Because that's anti-Semitism. So, okay, but you can't say, if you say you go to prison. So, well, all right, so I can't say they're running it. If I do say it, I'm going to be put into prison by those that are running it, right? So it actually increases anti-Semitism. You're saying the Jews do run the world. The Jews do it. And then the thing that you're trying to mitigate is you're the one exasperating it now. Because you're proving it. You're saying, well, we do run the show. You can't say it. All right? So if you want to demonstrate the contrary, allow us a public discourse. Not to support, but just to understand what the facts and figures are saying. So if you're talking about caste-led, who broke the truce? Who broke the ceasefire? The current thing, who broke the ceasefire? We can't have the discussion because we're too fearful of saying, lest we are put into supporting a terrorist organization just by mentioning who threw the first bomb. It's going to be supporting a terrorist organization. All right? So this is the issue. Just like in Russia, we can have that discussion. Russia side, Iraq side, we can have a discussion and come to a more honest conclusion. But once you say one group is off we can't have a conversation about it, then that restricts us from having to gain truth. And so the one party, and the funny thing here, or the sad thing here, is that the party that we're going to have to rely upon are notorious liars. Right? The lying of Israel is like, if it didn't result in the barbarism that it does, it would actually be comedic. Right? Like if it was any other thing, if you take the variables away from life, etc., it would be like comedic. It's like, when you catch your son doing something wrong, right? And they come out with a wild lie, and you say, well, I caught you then. There'll be another one. Oh, yeah, I didn't do it, Dad. Right? And we'll laugh at it. But it's just the barbarism of that lie. The 15 medics that were killed just a week ago, 2 weeks ago now. The medics, right?
Cool.
The refusal, and then where does the evidence come from? It's a dead medic who they find his phone, and he was recording the sirens were on, right? And it was going against the narrative. So because of a dead medic's phone, we got to find out what was happening. But before then, it was what? Hamas ministry versus Israel. So who are you going to trust?
And
so with the bizarre luck, if I'm going to call it luck, a dead person's phone, that we happen to find his phone, and then the evidence come out. So if you don't allow these people to come at least present their case, and then roast them, say, you deserve to be in prison, and there is a case against them, you need to ask for your war crimes, whatever, no problem, right? Condemn as much as you want. But when you do this, it stifles conversation, and then right now, you can see how one side has used that to kill and kill and kill without any pushback, because they're the referees of the battle.
So what happened very early on in the conflict, and I don't want to take too long on this, but just to add on this, right? One thing that happened very early on in the conflict is when the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, they started publishing figures of death tolls.
Yeah.
Israel were very quick to, or the Israeli
It's the Palestinian Authority that people, I know you're saying linguistically.
Yeah, so I mean the governing body of Gaza, right? They came out with death toll figures, but Israel were very quick to question those figures and say these are false, inflated figures. And then it became a thing for news outlets, media outlets, to then start labeling the ministry and specifically including the word Hamas in there as a way of showing that this is a specific, these figures or these statements or these facts are coming from this specific political entity, as a way of subtly discrediting them, because the assumption is if a state like Israel, a democratic liberal state, is mentioning it, then they're like us. That means they'll tell the truth. They're interested in truth, freedom of the press, etc. And Hamas are a barbaric, terrorist, evil death cult. So therefore, whatever they're going to say, don't believe it.
Yeah.
And then that assumption is then fed into the debates.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, but these were the figures published. Well, how can you trust it? Israel said that it's half of that. But you've already accepted the evil.
You know what's something that I haven't got I was reading it recently, but I haven't got it in front of me, so I'm not going to cite the specific example. But you know, a lot of the death tolls that we talk about in the past, where the death tolls are not just about those who are killed. The death tolls should eventually include those under whose aggression died. So what do I mean by this, right? So currently the death tolls that are presented, the reason why we say that's a low estimate or low number rather, is because you're only talking about those that are killed under the bombings. Directly bombings, right? Then of course you have people that are, let's say, they lose a limb, infection, and then you die.
Other casualties.
6 months. So I'm saying one is injuries, but then from injuries you may die later.
Yes.
That's not going to be put under the toll, the death toll. Then you have people that are, let's say, cancer patients that can't get hospital treatment.
Or babies incubators.
That was a real one. What I'm saying is just think about how wide it is, right? So how many illnesses there would be, infection there would be, so that people die, and we don't know. So that number, because I remember some months back there was one of these universities that they kind of done a predicted number was at 250,000 said. I remember people laughing off the number. Bet you get 250,000 from that. I don't know how accurate the number is, but what the argument that they were making was that when a war is done, and many of the calculations of the past, when you have like this many million people died, this many million people died, this many people killed by Stalin or Hitler, whatever, right? What they would normally do when it comes to calculation number is not that here we've got a number of 500,000 people. The idea is that under this aggression, this many people were there and now they're not there anymore. So they've lost their life because of your aggression. That includes direct killing, that could be wounding, that they died, it could be whatever, you starved them, whatever it is. Yeah. That comes under the death toll. So the death toll is predicted as much more higher. So the evilness of this, again, this is why we're saying is that once you have made this a terrorist organization in terms of every factor, which is the governing elite, which could be just your average, person working in the government, in the farming department, for example, right? He's still a terrorist. So even his statement is considered as, is from a terrorist, right? When you produce the discourse like that, in that simplistic terms, what it does is then you are taking away the reality of loss of life.
The voice of those people. That have been killed. Yeah.
And this is why we have to remember this, that we're living in a time where everything is documented. Yeah. So, when we have these kind of major events in the past, and the question is asked that, what did you do? Right? Where were you on this side of history? This is going to be one of those points that we should never let anyone forget. Right? So in 10 years' time, if we're still alive, 20 years' time, 100 years' time, the world is still here, right? We should make sure that we are aware of which side of history we're on. So if you are on the side of history, so like in the Iraq war, because social media was not as active, so a lot of the war-hungry people that were advocating for the war,
the hawks, they call them.
Yeah, a lot of their voices, because it wasn't in this time of mainstream social media, they can kind of get away with it. They can rebrand themselves. Right? They come out and they say, yeah, I was against the war, but yeah, I got it wrong, but let's carry on my political ambitions. As if a million people being dead is nothing, right? Like, I write a book and I got a typo. It's all right, it's a typo, isn't it? Right? I'm going to carry on with my career as if it's just like a mistake.
It's just
right?
another zero on the figure.
But they could do that because none of us have those or they are, but they're not as mainstream, right? Now we've got the tweets, we've got your statements. That's why I'm still saying that when you have like someone like Jordan Peterson, it could be 3 years, right? I don't know if he's still sane or has he lost the plot yet more?
I don't think he ever was sane.
But I don't know whatever his stage is in right now, right? But the point I'm saying is that when he started, the first day he said, give them hell.
Yeah.
That should never be forgotten.
That will eternally be remembered.
Right? That eternally remembered. We should all remember it. It's all saved, etc. So we should go to him in 5 years' time. Is that hell enough?
Yeah.
Every time he's been seen, every platform you sit with him on.
Are you happy with that?
You should start with that saying, you asked to give him hell. Is this enough hell? Do you want some more hell? What exactly are we looking at here? Right? That should be on their conscious and constantly mentioned. That it annoys them, that it persists with them, because it's the loss of life we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the side of history. So don't come to me, talk about Sharia law or Jihad or this, and you guys, this. Look at my life and what I've advocated for. Look at your life, what you've advocated for.
In all your enlightenment.
Right? And who is the one who's a barbaric sponsor of evil, and who's the one who's not apply or not advocate for any of that?
Exactly.
That's something that we have to always remember, and don't let people forget that.
Exactly. Whether they are, and it's interesting, whether they are Muslim or non-Muslim.
Yeah.
Because there are many who claimed, or they are Muslim, but they find themselves on the wrong side of history many a time, due to a lack of being informed of things. I'll
put the link up, right? It's called hamascase.com. And it will be on the Telegram channel, and I'll try to, if you guys can put it on the thing. This is, and by the way, this is legal document.
Yeah.
So there's no issue in reading this, and you can quote it. There's some news outlets I've read from it as well. It's not a problem, inshallah. Yeah. So I would say to those people who know people in the pro-Palestinian cause that want to just listen to what's being said. Right? Like, when you had the, although it's not the same, but you had the Bin Laden letter that became popular again a couple of years ago. Yep. It wasn't that everyone wanted to join the al-Qaeda, but it was just saying, he actually had grievances. And those grievances...
He voiced them.
It's one of his grievances that we can relate to. Right? We did do that. Or we did do that. We did do this as well. So those are grievances that we can relate to. Doesn't mean that it justifies the attacks he done, but at least we can understand that. So for that reason, at least, let them hear them out, and so you can say, this is why they did this. We don't agree why they might have done that, but we understand why they did this. Right? Let's have that perspective, because we've got the full picture of the propaganda of Israel from every angle possible, every lie, whatever you want. We've got everything here. Right? Just listening to Douglas Murray on the way here as I was coming here. It's very difficult, right? Douglas Murray on the way here. And now he's saying that in 2005, Palestine was given a state. Gaza was a state, right? So what's the true solution then? Right? Why is it that the whole point of Netanyahu said we're not going to give him a state? That's been his old project. But according to Douglas Murray, the Israeli expert, there wasn't a Palestinian state. That's Gaza.
Interestingly enough, that is then used to frame the debate as they were given a state and they chose to elect a death cult. So therefore, by extension, the people are also at fault.
Whatever the case is, so that means the two-state solution was done, right? That's what I'm saying. But if the whole purpose of Netanyahu said we're not going to let them have a state, then what do they have then? A strange forms of argumentation. Whatever the case, take time out, have a read, right? And inshallah, will be quite beneficial.
Now, one thing that this opens up a question of, and I want to navigate myself into this topic, right? One thing this, opens up a discussion of is the concept of jihad. To, use the word fully, because it's a buzzword again. It might get us knocked off. I don't know what will happen, but the J word, okay? Jihad. Now, jihad is something which is a part of Islam, undeniably, in different forms. You have, your personal jihad against the nafs. You have, a physical jihad on the battlefield, etc. These are things that are undeniably part of Islam. In terms of our understanding of jihad in a modern context, this opens up a question, in terms of, what is Hamas doing and what do we feel about it in that sense?
Okay, there's a couple of things here, right? Number one is that when we're talking about Hamas is a specific group. So if you want to advocate for a group. And like I said, I don't, and this is not because, it's not one of those that just because a terrorist organization, we can't secretly I do, none of that, right? We're very clear. Any of these groups that are there, I think I mentioned it explicitly, whether it's like, if it's a PTI party in Pakistan, whether it's the Taliban in Afghanistan, whether it's going to be Hamas, whether it's going to be Ikhwan Muslimin, or whatever party you can think of, right? Or if it's the UAE government, the Qatar government, right? I don't sit here and unconditionally say, yes, we support this specific movement, right? For a couple of reasons. Number one is that I don't sit here reading about geopolitics, or that's not my training, right? This is what we're supposed to be doing, right? So it's not my training. Number two, I don't feel comfortable when I've not known a group intimately to go and say, yes, this group is good, or no, this group is bad. It's much more better for us to talk about in concepts and ideas.
Yes.
So what we say is, if anyone is doing resistance in a just way, we support that, right? If you're saying, no, that's not, Hamas is not resist, it's terrorism, and you can demonstrate to me that terrorism is unjust, we say we don't support that. Right? It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So we say resistance.
Because it's in the interest of truth.
It's 100%. So it's not about because the reason why I say this is there's been many a time where you may make mention of a specific group and say, I support this group. And then someone turns around and says, well, did you know they did this? And I said, no, I didn't know that. So do you support that? So, okay, I don't. So instead of having to, and nor does it make much difference as if I've got some massive influence that there's a bunch of people going to go support the group because I said so. But I don't see the incentive to do this. So
exactly.
But the idea of resistance, as you mentioned, is in international law.
Yeah.
That occupation can be fought with resistance.
Yes.
If you think Hamas are doing it via terrorism and that's not right, no problem. But it doesn't take away the Palestinian right for military resistance. Now, that's under the guise of just war even. And when we talk about jihad, so there's been a number of calls for jihad. And I remember, before as well, I was some students saying, has there been calls for jihad? If we have to whisper this, has there been calls for jihad?
Again, because it's like a terrible word.
Yes, can we wink, wink, etc. Right? Is there a call for? Well, what type of jihad are we talking about here? Famously, we divide jihad into two categories. We have jihad qudumi and jihad difa'i. Jihad qudumi is what is known as offensive jihad. The purpose of jihad, which is to لِتَكُونَ كَلِمَةُ اللَّهِ عُلْيَا. The word of Allah Ta'ala can be high. So you basically do to propagate Islam, right? So this was known as offensive jihad. It was most clearly manifested during the era of empires, where you expanded, you conquered, or you got conquered, and you spread your message that way.
Yeah.
Many books have been written about the notion of offensive jihad and pacts and agreements, etc. Mufti Taqi's got a book on Islam and politics. I mentioned Shaykh al-Qardawi last time, Fiqh al-Jihad. Shaykh Ramadan Bhuti's got a book, al-Jihad كيف نفهم كيف نمارسه. I'm sure there's a bunch of other books people can put out there, right?
Yeah.
So how they try to... But that's not our discussion right now.
Yeah.
The discussion right now is what they talk about jihad being necessary. What they mean by that is that those who have authority, those who have capability, who are around the region, must do everything within their capacity to defend the oppressed. Right? That's it. If they don't do it, the obligation extends. Obligation extends. But the difference between just war and jihad is that jihad is a religious term. So there's a God-given obligation. If you don't do it, you're going to be answered to Allah. Right? This is for those who are in authority, those who have capacity. This is not about people in the UK, running around with a stick and trying to hit someone, right?
Wanton, what's the term? Wanton violence, that's vigilante. Vigilante
so it's not vigilante attacks, So it's about those who have authority. So if you look at Mufti Taqi's recent fatwa, which has been shared by Middle Eastern Eye, has been shared on Twitter, and I'm not on Twitter, but I've seen it on WhatsApp, right? So it's not anything which is even... I would say,
controversial.
If you give me a leftist non-Muslim and say to him, well, this is what he said, is there anything that is against, you oppose that? Of course, it would be against the notion of being for God-given right? The theological aspect of it, but just from a pure ethical and moral standpoint and through the lens of just war, it's a just war. You can say anything to the contrary.
Yeah.
Now, if you're going to ask me what's that going to look like, then I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Meaning, how does that actually look? What is going to be done? You do whatever's within so our job is to say you have to do what's in your capacity to help. Now, if someone turns around and says, not that we're having a conversation with states, but they say, well, we can't do anything. There's nothing I can do. So we say, well, remember, you're going to have to answer to Allah. If this is the most you can do, right, then okay. You have to stand before Allah. Just that's what, because there's no other capacity I have, right, beyond issuing that statement. So that's all it is.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a serious thing. It's not something that you take lightly, but it's a serious thing. But that's the reality of it. So yes, the type of jihad that's being called for would not. It's a buzzword, so people get afraid by the word.
Yeah.
But there's nothing in that word when spoken about in this context, which is saying about killing all Jews, right, carrying out attacks. And Mufti Taqi gives this fatwa, or even with him, by the way, this is a united fatwa in Pakistan.
Yeah.
It was with the Barelvis and Deobandis got together, and I think I haven't said, I've just seen the image of it. Even I'm sure the other groups as well, but it was a united fatwa. In Pakistan, they gave this fatwa, and I'm sure the other countries as well. It's not arguing that all Jews are now unsafe. People in America and the UK are unsafe. It's nothing to do with that.
It's in the context of helping oppressed people. And this is the point, right? If we were just to flip the terms and make it in a more secular context, people who on the secular side or on the left side, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim, would be much more. It would be more digestible for them, ironically. Yeah. But it's just a theological concept of it makes it scary.
Yeah.
But it's nothing.
Because
different.
Anything that's done, because I think even the idea of, I think for many people, although we don't speak like this, but the idea that as Muslims, we have this conviction that there is a life after this life. And we do actions for that life, preparation of that life. That's a radical idea for many people.
Definitely.
Right? Just that concept that, and you know what I found quite, and I'm digressing a bit, right? I was once, no problem, right? I was once, years ago, there's like a dawah store, right? And dawah store studios many years ago. And I remember this man came, and he must have been around 60 or 65, I don't know what he was, right? An old man. And so he goes, and I was about 16, 17, right? So, fresh up watching your videos and thought I could debate everyone, right? So as I was standing there, he asked me, he goes, what's this all about? So I go, well, we're trying to work out, like, what's the purpose of life? I had this key question, what's the purpose of life? I remember his reaction, he goes, that's a good question, I never thought about it, right? The guy was in his 60s, and he never had thought about the question of, is there, meaning for us, the idea as a believer, and I know Muslims have a life of ghafla, heedlessness, right? But the idea is like, everything what we do is just geared towards that. Yeah. Right? We eat food, we say, we thank Allah, so it's connected to the hereafter. It's for Allah, for the ghaib is connected to the unseen. We wake up, we pray salah in the morning. First thing we do, we make salah. If we miss salah, wake up and say, miss salah. Right? So anything, everything is geared towards the hereafter. A lifestyle which doesn't have that in it sounds bizarre and radical to us.
Definitely.
I don't know how you live. I don't know what you do with it.
It's purposeless.
But then for them, the idea that we do something for the hereafter is radical.
Yeah.
So the second, if I can put a case forward and say, we want to, give our life, or we're asking giving life for a just cause because we will attain paradise, that doesn't make sense to me. But if I say I want to give my life for my country, I get that.
Or to help oppressed peoples.
Yeah, that I can get behind that because you're a hero and I get what you're trying to do. Because nationalism, your national identity is greater than your religious identity. So if a person fights a war because of their national identity, is a hero. But God forbid they fight for their religious identity.
For their God. For
their God. Because the second you do that, you're fundamentalist crazy, even if the goal is just.
Let me flip that as well, right? That's on the defensive side, right? Yeah. But then we can even have that kind of a comparison between offensive jihad and, what we can see in the world as the spread of liberalism, right? Something that I read up when I was doing my bachelor's, which is many years ago now, annoyingly, but one thing that I learned, and I remember sticking in my mind, was in international relations theory, many theorists, they come up with this idea that liberal states don't go to war with liberal states because they are sharing an identity of their liberal ideology. They identify with each other, but they go to war with illiberal states, and often in the context of spreading liberalism because they don't like illiberalism. They can't identify with them, they can't trade, they can't, be in harmony with them. So therefore there's automatic conflict and they must spread liberalism to them. Because the assumption under any ideology, whether it be liberalism or otherwise, is that ideology, you subscribe to it because you think it's correct and it's the most ideal way of people to live. Now, that is how liberalism is geared towards spreading itself in a militaristic way, and it's something which we've seen since the Second World War.
Yeah.
All you have to do is just play around with the words.
Yeah, because there's two things here, right?
Yeah.
The concept of spreading good ideas,
Yeah.
right, to kind of have what is correct and to spread that. That's something which, the Bush is spreading of democracy.
Yeah.
Right. So democracy is seen as an inherent good.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore we need to spread democracy.
Yep.
We need to preserve, rights for people to have gay relations. So therefore we need to somehow put pressure onto countries to also be okay with it, because we believe those morals and values are good.
And
even though we're secular countries and we have no objective notion of morality, but we can still impose what we deem to be moral on other people.
Mm-hmm.
The concept is not what we're against.
Mm.
It's the morals that we're against.
Exactly.
So we should be careful, because sometimes when we critique this theory,
mm-hmm.
we're critiquing the idea of what gives us the right to impose our values or spread our values on others.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the spreading of your values on others which is the problem.
Because both of them agree on that. You can do that.
We don't have an issue with that. We as Muslims don't have an issue with that.
Exactly.
The problem we have is the values that you are imposing.
Yep.
The values that you are spreading is where we are at loggerheads here.
Exactly.
Right? So therefore, that's one thing. Number two is the means by which you spread your values
mm-hmm.
by setting up coups and causing civil wars, etc., that you do in countries that you are not following.
Restricting aid.
All this is then not permissible based on Islam.
Yeah.
Because now you are targeting civilians. That's what, but this question is very, it becomes very theoretical, because you're talking about the theory of how
states go to war.
The jihad would be, in this sense of spreading Islam or spreading values, where we don't actually have a model anyone attempt to do that
in the modern context.
So therefore, when we have these discussions, this is very theoretical.
Definitely.
But we do know how not to do it.
Yes.
And we can, and what has happened.
Yes.
So again, it's like you're taking us up on a potential thought crime against people who have done the crime. Right? Tenfold, yeah. So let's assume it's a crime, right? Obviously, let's work at that theory as a crime, right? So you got one guy who thought about a murder. Right? You got one guy who's killed 10 people. But our worry is about what? The thought of this person that he's thinking about murder.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's similar with the idea of the Palestinian resistance. So we say Hamas are calling for a genocide. If they could do a genocide. There's a genocide with those who have ability. But we're going to focus in on those who don't have the capacity, right? Who are actually saying we don't want genocide, but you got that side. And then you got someone actively doing it to the best of their ability.
And they're not worried.
And our focus is on the thought of the
victims
that this is what they're going to do. So it doesn't, there's not an argument to say, because you still have to justify your thought. So it doesn't mean just because we think it's wrong, I'm saying we have to justify it.
Of course.
But it's just, again, it's the shifting or the way that your relationship, the way that the discussion is being framed.
The false comparison. Right.
It's like we're having a football match. And in the football match, I decide the pitch, I decide the size of my goal, I decide the size of your goal, right? I have the cameraman who's my student as the referee, right? And then, I get 10 players, you get 2 players, and now we want to have a match, and then you foul me, and everyone's like, what's this guy doing, right? This guy can't play fairly, right? Like, what's wrong with you? Look, ask the referee.
check the footage.
Yeah, and the footage is all guys sitting there with AI meddling with this, right? So it's such a bizarre idea, but that's the idea. So what we need to do as not just as Muslims, but people fighting for justice, right? But Muslims primarily, that's our audience is Muslims primarily, people who are scholars or tulab al-ilm, etc., is that we must make sure that ourselves and for our masses that we don't let others dictate the conversation for us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We don't let others dictate the game. If you're going to come and you want to play me in a game, right, it has to be under fair rules.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're not going to play fair rules, these are my rules. This is why I'm going to sit.
Mm-hmm.
This is what my conversation is about.
And
that has to only be based on being intellectually in the know. This is why it's related to the academic know. There's the podcast, book review podcast, is that if we're going to relate to reading.
Yes.
So one last point I'll mention on this, because we have about a million things to talk about, right? But one last thing I'll mention on this, and you can chime in on some of the points that you want to add to this if you want to, inshallah, is that we've got a lot of work to do.
Yes.
Right? There's a lot of work to do. None of us are doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't know who will sit there and say, yes, I've done enough. not just on this case, but the issue of Gaza and Palestine. We say Gaza, we want to talk about Palestine as a whole. So the West Bank and Gaza. Not just on that, right? And the various levels, but we've got work to do, right? In terms of our da'wah, work of ourselves. Can't forget that, right? The work of our families, our work, halal income. There's enough work to be done, right? And on this case just alone, there's enough to be done, whether that's going to be in the form of protests, whether that's going to be in the form of boycotts, whether in the form of doing khutbahs, whether that's going to be in the form of, even if it could be just like, I'm just going to like videos.
Yeah. Sharing
the album, share stuff. Like, I know people sometimes, I used to get annoyed, like, people put up on their WhatsApp status, like, I was like, well, who are you sharing it to? Doesn't matter now. Now it doesn't matter. Just put it out there. Keep the conversation alive. Keep the conversation alive. And you don't know who you can convince. It could be just like a passing comment. Someone may come and then listen to it, and that may shift them. You have to remember that the people in the world today that have this position of power, their children are online.
Yeah.
Right? Their children are online. Isn't it? Elon Musk's son's a daughter now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah. And often speaks out against.
Right. So Elon Musk's son's a daughter, right? And they are against their father.
Yeah.
Right? So all of these people have kids on social media. Who knows that maybe your da'wah, you're forwarding even, or because you like something, it increased the algorithm to put the video, and then one of these guys saw it. And now the dinner table was saying, Dad, what are you up to?
Yeah.
Right? And then they're in these big schools, and they can make some shift, and this massive shift happens in the world. And it had some link to something small that you did. But there's enough work to be done. And the bare minimum that we can do is that you keep yourself intellectually in the know.
Yeah.
Right? If you've come to me now after 18 months and upset that, because what happens is that, and I noticed this for a while, and I've also, so when I'm saying this, it's not people do this, I do this a lot as well, right? Is that it's nice to, because when you're upset, when you see something, right? And like, you see these clips and videos and it's heart-wrenching, right? And now you're upset, you're emotionally, so you want to do something and say something, right? And so what you end up, a lot of people do is like, you're not doing enough.
Yeah.
Ulama are not doing enough.
Yeah.
Right? These guys are not doing enough. Why is he saying it this way for? This, even when people are like, if like this is my perspective now, and you can agree, like, we have people amongst our community, let's say like the Madkhali group.
Mm-hmm.
They're not on it. Mm-hmm. They've got God knows crazy ideas. They've got many issues, right? Yeah. So what happens is like, someone, it's them. Let's attack them. Yes, there needs to be a place where we call out fellow Muslims, but let's not be sidetracked by that.
Yeah.
Right? If someone has done, forget them, right? But if someone has like called out, but not the way we want them to call out. If someone's spoken up, not the way we want them to spoken out. They're still our team. What we do, let's see how.
Mm.
But let's not be sidetracked and put into a conversation where all we're talking about that, and that takes up. And it happens to me many times. Like someone, but what if you meant this? We could have done it because of this. And what about this clip and that clip? And we spent hours.
It goes back to that funny kind of questioning that many people do in the Arab world. Ma ra'yukum fi, and then it's a whole discussion about so and so personality.
Yeah.
In a useless kind of discussion.
And so if that person is doing enough or not doing enough, you've given them nasiha, and then no problem. You give your time, but your bulk of the time should be on the work. Yeah. It should be done on the effort. Whether it's on this, whatever issue, I'm talking about this specific issue, right? So are you doing what you can do, right? It could be something like, okay, the boycott is getting fatigued a bit. Let me draw up a design of that. Let me go to the masjid and hand out leaflets of the boycott, whatever this style. Let me look into the boycott, see if there's something I can contribute there. Just on that, I'm saying, for example, right? Let's go back to my family. Let's talk to them about it. Whatever. Because remember, we have it, because this is what we have to understand, right? Each one of us has an area of influence.
Yep.
And that area of influence varies from person to person, right? So your area of influence might be, let's say, 80 people. My area of influence may be 50 people. This is area of influence. Then some people have wider area of influence. So in my area of influence, for example, the head of states are not in it, right? As far as I know, right? I don't think any of the head of states are watching me.
You'd be surprised.
Okay, fair enough, right? So that doesn't now mean that I can't say anything about them, but when it comes to me organizing my time of effort, I have to prioritize where my influence is on.
Are you going to now continue directly addressing Mohammed bin Salman, for example? Or are you going to speak to your family?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not that we don't. Let's be very clear here.
Yeah.
Right? It's not saying that you can't say anything about, the leaders who are not doing enough, and you can't vent and you can't speak about, and No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying is you have limited time. You have limited influence. And so if you want to say, okay, I want to say this because on Qiyamah I can say that I said this. No problem. But out of the time that you could spend, where is it spent the most? Where most effort you can make? So all you do is you organize your time, whether it's on this issue in the most effective way possible.
Yeah.
Right? That's the message. It's not don't do this or don't speak about this or don't. It's just about putting things in perspective, because what happens many times is we get sidetracked. And when you get sidetracked, you get to vent and it makes you feel like you've done something.
But not much impact.
Not much impact, because I sat there, me and you, we sat there for an hour talking about the evils of this regime, and we come back like, I've done something, because you vented that.
Yeah.
But you done nothing.
Yeah.
Right? It was more of a form of,
getting
giving
out
to your hawa. It's like, so I can go home and feel a bit better.
Yeah.
I can go home and lift that guilt off me that, I did something because I did speak out, or sometimes I swore at him even, right? So you got that out of your system, that's fine. And sometimes you, as long as within the hudud of Sharia, that's okay. But let's not get sidetracked by these things. That's the only message I'll give. If and that's general. It's nothing specific. It's a general message. Applies to me primarily because I do it a lot, right? And then I'll just give it a general nasiha to others as well.
I think I'll add to that is that just on that is analysing what has the greatest amount of impact, and it's not always the prettiest kind of thing. Not everyone has a sphere of influence that they can stand up on a podium and talk to people, because no one's going to listen to them. Their greatest measure of impact is them ensuring their whole family is boycotting Coca-Cola, for example, or boycotting other Israeli-related companies. That's their greatest effect of influence, and that's the greatest impact they can have. And them doing that is a time better spent, like you mentioned, than them trying to be on a podium and criticizing people who are on a podium.
Also, what I just add to that is that sometimes we have to rein people in.
Yeah.
People lose cannon sometimes. You don't want me to speak about a bunch of topics. If I start talking about it, God knows what I'd say. Right? So you'd probably be wiser to say, just don't speak.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes you're silent is better. As long as you're not being a barrier for other people.
Yeah.
But there are people like that. They lose cannons. So you say, you know what? You sit this one out. You help in some other way.
Yeah.
Because the whole purpose is that you're part of this body. When we say al-Muslimuna ka-rajulin wahid, ka-jasadin wahid, the Muslim Ummah is like one body. What we mean by one body is that everyone has a role to play. That role could be that I'm just going to not cause other people harm.
Yeah.
Right? And that's it comes in the narration as well. I can't remember the narration off the top of my head. That your role could be that I'm just going to make sure people don't are affected by my shar. I have a...
Kaful adha.
Yes, I have a, I'm quite... when I speak, I'm very harsh towards people. I say bad stuff. I do not... So I know that about myself. So my thing is I just don't want to harm other people. That's my sabr. Right? And for others, there's much more you can do. So you do whatever's in your capacity, the best of your ability. You mashwara, you ask people, right, what can we do? Right? And like I said, this is being spoken specific with this, but then this applies to any other dini khidmah you have. Because remember, most people have a 9-to-5 job. They'll come home. If they're married, they have kids. They've got tarbiyah of the kids to do. Right? That's the important thing you teach in maktab, right? Many parents just send their kids to maktab. There's no, they think that's the tarbiyah done. Nothing at home. You come home, you give the iPad, and then the iPad does the tarbiyah for them. And then they grow up, and then they're 14, 15, and they're doing God knows what, and watching God knows what, and they're like, I did everything. I said, the maktab, didn't I? Right? So they have to give time there. So you have to, everything plays a role in it. So you need to say, where do I set up? So right now, and this is the balance between, maybe you have two extremes. You have the one extreme, which is that it's all about working on the self. And there's no need to activism, because as long as we rectify ourselves, everything will be fine. And the other side is where dua or amal salih, or talking about the nafs and our sickness of our hearts and stuff, and the evil that the Muslim community is built in, to focus on that and not activism, right? Then that's the evil. But how can you talk about people are dying, you're talking about how to pray salah? And
the activism in and of itself is enough for a person to absorb.
So no one says that explicitly, but that's the assumption. It becomes very much like a leftist revolutionary movement. So it's about activism, social justice, and you do your deen, that's fine, you carry on, I'll join you, dua. But so you belittle the idea of dua. You belittle the idea of a'mal salihah. You belittle the idea. It's about finding the balance between that. There are people that are very good at that, but it's very difficult.
And the key point is to be, when you engage in those activities, to do what you can in your capacity to be rasikh in the, the information and the knowledge around that topic, especially in this one.
I remember like something that was Mufti Abdurrahman Mungera mentioned, where I'm pretty sure it was him, where he mentioned that, when I think it was the adab of going to a protest, which I found fascinating, because protestism is an activism, right?
Yeah.
So there's the Islamic adab, غض البصر, lower your gaze, do the dhikr of Allah Ta'ala, make dua, don't miss your salah, right? Those kind of factors which are like shari adab. So what you do is you get the activism, but it's not divorced from the inner self. Because at the end of the day, it's Allah Ta'ala you're going to get change from. And if you're going to go there with a sick heart, how's your dua ad'iyah going to be accepted or have impact?
And how's your activism going to have impact?
That's what I mean. But yeah, so you have to have the two that come together. That's the prophetic way. That's how it is. So sometimes we have binaries, or we talk in binaries. So we sometimes, even though no one would explicitly say that don't do any activism.
Yeah.
It's all about your deeds. And no one's going to say just do activism, about prayer. But the way they talk about the other aspect is as if, as practice, they'll kind of sideline it, saying, you guys have not, but they'll kind of dismiss a lot of that in this stuff. So that's something that we have to be very conscious of. And we don't fall for any of these traps of shaitan.
Now, it's time to move on to the books part of the books podcast. We want to start off with not actually a book, ironically. We want to start off with an article.
Yeah.
An article that you wrote in Urdu. So I have not been able to access it in its glory yet.
You know about it.
I know about it. We've spoken about it. We've laughed about it as well.
Yeah.
But this article that you wrote as a response to Engineer Mirza Saab, otherwise known as the plumber.
In Pakistan, that's what they say as a joke.
The plumber Saab, right? It's a response to him on what exactly, and what was the reason behind this, just so that everyone's up to speed with it.
Yeah, so those again who are new to this or not heard this, we did a podcast about a year ago now, where we spoke about Engineer Mirza, and we did like a review we tried to review some of his research papers, and then we went through like a video just talking about the nature of his mistakes and how there's like a fundamental problem in his da'wah and everything. So we went to the fiqh of it. So by the way, this part we're going to jump from various topics, right?
As we know already.
Right, so be careful, be ready for that. So if you're like, that's the politics side of it, then you're completely or somewhere else now, right? So at that time, I had written an English draft. And the English draft was just for my own sake. That when people come and ask me, especially from Pakistan, right, I've mentioned it before that he's from the same city I am, so I have a responsibility. So this individual, Engineer Ali Mirza, has garnered a massive following in Pakistan, right? A massive following in Pakistan on YouTube. I don't know about on the ground, but on YouTube, massive following. And one of the reasons is because people like drama, so he loves the drama, right? It's hard for a person who doesn't understand Pakistani culture to get why he's so popular. Maybe you can how's your Gujarati?
Poor.
But do you understand it?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm sure in Gujarati, you probably have those that can, they speak, but then they throw in slang. Do you have that?
If they did, I wouldn't be able to tell.
You want to tell, right? You tell, right? Yeah. So they have this charisma about them where they can just, and Bengali, I'm sure they have that as well, where there's a ability of speaking Bengali. So in Pakistan, it would be you speak Urdu.
It's in English because speakers who are younger and they're able to speak in a much more
colloquial it's just a bit more so what he does is he's got the Urdu speaking, and then he whacks in some Punjabi in there. And it's funny. It's funny guy.
Charisma.
There's a charisma behind it, but he does that, right? But one of the main things that he was talking about, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, please just watch the podcast, right? We speak about it in detail. Again, I'll put the link up, you can watch it. But in that, I mentioned that in English, I had just kind of written up some points of factual errors in 2 small videos of his. So I go, instead of me having to watch every single video, and there's hundreds of hours of content, all I'm going to do is give me 2 videos of him where he's talking about fiqh, and I'm just going to respond to it. So I write up in English, and I put the Arabic in scans, or screenshots rather, right? And so I put it as a draft, and I thought I'll get it translated. And some of the students here, one of them wanted to translate it, but I think it was a bit difficult because the Arabic text was a bit obscure, and they made an effort, alhamdulillah, but it didn't work out so well. Then there's another ustad who said, I'll edit it, but then he got occupied. I think his son was not feeling too well for a while. He said, well, give me shifa, I hope he's better now. But it's been a while. So I just didn't bother him again. They were just there on the shelf for a while. And then in Ramadan, I was just doing a lot of these kind of projects and stuff. So I thought it might be a good time, spend a few days, and I'll try to translate it myself. So that's what I did. I went through the Urdu, doing myself, and then trying to get AI to check it up sometimes, to verify the translation is making sense, and then we're going through it and translating the Arabic, and then I've formulated into a article, and then one of our students from White Thread, she read through it, all right, and she edited it, for free, and then I didn't go too much into it. I mean, that was enough, and then I put it up online. So anyone who wants to read it now, it's very useful. All it does is it shows you he's got the link to his videos. It shows you what he said and what the facts say. Very simple. So meaning anyone who's a student of Engineer Mirza, I think his definition of student, anyone who watches his podcast, watches his videos is a student. So I don't know how many thousand subscribers we are right now. Our YouTube channel?
I have no clue.
It's about 3,000, I think. Wherever it is, right? So like by that token, I have 3,000 students, right? So if there's more, then 4,000 students, right? So that's how he kind of calculates the students. So whoever the students, anyone who has issues, just say to him, look, here's a document. He's gone through these videos. These are like, they're not mistakes that an alim would make, if you put it that way. And at least got this consistently.
Yeah.
Right? Especially what he's trying to do. This kind of, because his effort is trying to show how the fiqhi madahib, this is how crazy it is, right? Yeah. He wants to demonstrate how the madahib fiqhiyya, the four madhabs, the Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali, like, you don't have to follow any of them. But I will do islah of them despite me not knowing the Arabic language.
Yeah.
Right? I will rectify it without knowing the Arabic language. Right? I'm trying to think of a similar case, like, I don't know, I'm going to change the field of physics and I can't pronounce half the terms.
I'm going to change the field of physics, but I failed the foundation paper.
Right? Those who watch sport, I'm going to win the Ballon d'Or, but I can't run fast. Actually, that doesn't work. People can probably do that, right? Whatever it is, it's something as silly as that.
Yeah.
Right? Or I'm going to win the Ballon d'Or, but I'm 45. I'm not, but I'm just saying that, something like that. Something crazy like that, right? Yeah. That's how bizarre this thing is. Yeah. So it's just a paper that exposes that. So those who are interested, have a look at it. You can send it to anyone's asked you questions. There's there. But I also say that this is just for my sake. So if people ask me, I send this to them. Those who are interested in something, please go online in who watches these stuff videos. There's a person by the name of Pakistan called Maulana Imran Safdar. Right? If you understood Urdu, you'll be his biggest fan. Right? If you understood Urdu, you'll be his biggest fan. He's absolutely hilarious, but academically. Yeah. Right? But he is very funny, right? But you don't understand Urdu, right? So those in terms of Maulana Imran Safdar, and he's got these clips, which must be now in 800, 900, where he just mentions the mistakes, either contradictions and mistakes of Mirza and Engineer Mirza. And there's mistakes in there that if a second year student said that, we will laugh at it. All right, that kind of stuff, right? Like, Sayyid is ismu fa'il, Sayyid is maf'ul. And the thing is, the average person doesn't laugh. They don't know what's the mistake. Yeah. All right. A recent video, sorry, I know we shouldn't be talking about this because we're going to move on to the books, but a recent video that Imran Safdar put out, he talks about the term, khilaf al-awla, right? He goes, the term, he first says khilaf al-ula. So he goes, khilaf al-ula, and you know who came out with this term first? Ala Hadrat, Mullah Ahmad Reza. He's against Mullah Ahmad Reza Khan's the first one to say khilaf al-ula, right? If he did say khilaf al-ula, he probably is the first one to say it. But khilaf al-awla, which is a term that you find in every usul of fiqh book, I don't know what, every book you see is there, right? But he ascribes it as the initiator of this term from Maulana Ahmad Reza Khan.
Ironically, he has done khilaf al-ula here.
Yeah. But the reality here is that, but the problem here is that nearly everyone should understand Arabic, so they don't understand the gravity of the mistake. Yeah. Right? So we can laugh as like in our Maulvi circles, right? But no one else does. So that's why I thought, you know what? Let's go through, like, he wants to say there's no hadith or something, I'll show you the hadith in the paper. You want to say that, talk about aqaid, I'll talk to you about aqidah. I'll talk about qat'i dhanniyyat. If you don't understand it, and this is the purpose, right? So if a person says, yeah, it's a bit technical, I understand it, but then you shouldn't be talking about the topic. Yeah.
Or you shouldn't believe him on this topic.
Yeah, so what are you interested in it for? Yeah. If I want to talk to you about a issue about medicine, and I'm arguing with you and say, okay, read this paper, I don't understand that paper, then what are you talking to me about it? Because you don't understand the content that we're talking about, don't debate me about it. Yeah. So anyway, that's papers there. Again, it's on the Telegram channel. Yeah. Right? I mean, I've uploaded it there. It's on academia page. So you guys can do it in there, inshallah.
Inshallah. And on that note now let's get on to the serious works. The more formal, less hilarious context, right? We'll start off with the science of hadith, and specifically regarding the introduction to the science of the noble hadith by Mufti Muhammad Chati, who is in Blackburn Darul Uloom, And he's got a course on takhasus fil hadith. So I
believe so.
Yeah.
I think it's still running. I'll have to confirm if it is. We'll put the link up to his channel or his website, or you see it. It's called Islamic Knowledge.
Yes.
He's got a Telegram channel.
Yeah.
He's got a YouTube channel. Sorry, I'll come to that. He's got a Telegram channel, so his courses are there. So he was doing a takhasus program in hadith. If he still is, I'm not sure, but you can go there if I have recordings, whatever. But go on that channel, you'll see his content, inshallah.
Yeah. Now, we've already discussed...
he's also got, as you said, a YouTube channel. He does book reviews.
Yes.
So he's our competition.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
We're winning.
I think we are. I think he's smashing. He's doing much better.
So we've already discussed introductions to sciences. We've like madkhals, the genre, the madkhal genre. We've discussed that in a separate podcast, which we will link. We've said that a lot this episode, but we will link that in the description. So basically, just watch all the other previous podcasts because we're going to keep referring to them, and you'll have fun anyway. So this is another introduction to the science of hadith, and we discussed that there are many of these available out there, and they kind of rehash and discuss the same thing again and again. Maybe may frame it in a way that's easier for the students, or different students benefit from different works at different times. That all of that, we mentioned that already. So with that in mind, if you haven't seen the video, the other episode, you might as well watch that one. What makes this introduction distinguished in the English language?
Excellent. So this is a, by the way, I've never met Mufti Muadh. I've spoken to him on WhatsApp. I've never met Mufti Muadh. So we've spoken on WhatsApp, we exchanged thoughts and ideas, etc. on friendly terms. So this madkhal is in the first distinction is in English. So it's one of the first, if not the only, this type of book you find in English. And when I first heard of such a book, I'm always skeptical of technical works in the English language, because I always think, okay, what's the purpose behind it? So after speaking to Mufti Muadh, and why he's not just speaking about, he's mentioned it as well, and it makes a lot of sense, is that when we're doing we'll come to the book in a second, but when we're doing ulum al-hadith in most madrasas tend to have one book.
Yes.
Right? So it's usually Nukhbat al-Fikr, but with the commentaries of Nuzhat al-Nadar or Ibn Hajar. And Nuzhat al-Nadar or Ibn Hajar, when someone reads it as the first text, Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, expects a lot from the student.
Yes.
So when you're reading it, and this is your first book, it is not an easy book.
No.
Right? And I remember, because when I was teaching it, I realized that, man, like, there's a lot of points I have to stop and then kind of explain the background to what he's trying to allude to.
You need a lot of prerequisites to get that book.
So he's assuming that, So although people read it like a primary text, it's not the easiest work to teach or even learn from.
I remember teaching it. I remember you teaching it.
So you remember how many times you had to kind of digress and say, okay, Ibn Hajar is alluding to this discussion.
Yes.
But now this is your first time doing it. So maybe you had been reading before, but the rest of the class would be like, oh, who's Ibn Hibban? Oh, I have to learn about this guy? Oh, Hakim says this. What book? Who's Hakim?
And then it becomes too many names, too many days, too many
ideas, and then you forget the whole idea that he's talking about in the beginning, right? So it can get quite complicated. So when you're doing ulum al-hadith in madrasa, usually your book you're doing, and then you go straight to dawra. So you don't have much time to learn about isnad or learn about, unless you go do a takhasus program after. But you're not even on most of you are not even on a basic level of understanding how these things operate. And having an Arabic book is daunting. Because you're already struggling there. So this kind of fills in that void. So those students are in their 3rd, 4th, 5th year, and you want to kind of understand the idea of ulum al-hadith, how it works. And not just that. Well, I'm going to say the main part I'm going to focus on, because I'm not the second half I'll do, but the main focus is understand the history of hadith.
Yes.
Understand the defense of the transmission of hadith in contrast to accusations against it.
Which we also have a previous podcast on called on the book Min al-Nabi al-Bukhari.
Ah, yes, the very first one. Yeah. But those books can be quite daunting. Right? Because if I open that book and I say read it as a 3rd, 4th, 5th year student, you'll struggle.
Yes.
You have to be, again, have some sort of competency in the field to do so. And so to fill in that void, having a book like this is extremely important. So what Mufti Muadh has done in this book is that, and it's also cool that he's got this little, that was a page ad. He's got this, what do you call these, bookmarks.
Yes.
On the bookmarks, this is for Hanafi fiqh. So books, so like he's mentioned here, Al-Hidayah, Sharh Bidayah al-Mubtadi by al-Marginani. Then he talks about the book, right? Then he's got Al-Nihaya, Sharh Hidayah, so the commentaries of Hidayah, Al-Ghaya, Sharh Hidayah, and who wrote them. And it's just like these kind of cool little things. And one of the things that Mufti Muadh does, and this is something which is one of the fundamental ways to progress a student, is that for you to gain proficiency in any field, you need to be aware of the figures and books in that field.
Definitely.
Right? If you're not aware of those figures and books in the field, then you're just going to be dictated to some basic concepts, and that's all you can deal with.
And how to bulay.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. That's what you end up becoming. Yeah. How to bulay means?
Like a person who gets found
at night. Yeah. So you don't know what you're gathering, right? So that's the idea. So what he does quite a lot of effort on is that in this book, so even like the bookmark for the student, these are the gold mines in terms of memorizing these works. Not just memorizing, go and referring to them.
Having it in your mind.
Having it in your mind. Because what you want to do is when you come across a discussion, I'll give you an example, right? I went to talk about this today, actually. How long have we been going on for?
1 hour, 20 minutes.
Okay. We just don't want you get too much and we'll stop, inshallah, right?
I'm good. I'm on my mocha. I'm
okay.
ready.
All right. So, like one of the things that you kind of, which has become quite common now, it's nothing to do with the book, right? Just for a second, right? I'll digress for a minute. That is the usage of things like ChatGPT, AI, right? And so I've seen a lot of people, I'll share with you a horror story outside of the podcast because it's still ongoing, but people use AI to translate, to present material. And what happens is that if you're not aware of that science well, you're going to make some serious blunders.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to creep in there that people don't notice. You have to be aware of it. So these resources like AI, Shamila, Google, etc., they're great sources.
As good as the user.
100%, yeah, as good as user. Now, AI, to the difference is that it provides you such like solid content that a person starts to say, this is pretty more knowledgeable than me. You know what? You probably get a better answer from that guy than asking me, so I might just give his answer, right? But if you're not aware of what's happening, you're going to start making serious blunders. So I was just doing so you have to be aware of the field still. I'll give you an example, right? I'll give you 2 examples of this. When I first started doing research for National Waqf, so doing my awqaf, so I first started doing ChatGPT, so okay, best books or the most popular books in academia on Waqf. So it puts me a list forward. And the list, it has Muhammad Qasim Zaman, Waqf in the subcontinent. And I've read most of the things of Muhammad Qasim Zaman, right? And I've never heard of that book or like an article. So I started Googling it because I just assumed it was correct. And there was no sign of it. So I go, can you give me a reference? Oh, sorry, we mistakenly gave you that, right? So it's made up that. Now, if I was unaware and I just, without giving credit, I just copy and paste as a bibliography of the main books of Waqf, 99% of people are not going to work it out.
No.
Right? So you start to become confident. Next time I'll do it again. Yeah. Just a couple of days ago, I was doing a practical session with some students to say how to use AI in a positive way and some of the pitfalls of AI. So I did a similar, I go, give me like a list of books, right? So they go, can you ask, we've got a topic on Islamic inheritance. All right, so what are good English books in Islamic inheritance, right? So I'll go, English book Islamic inheritance. The first book that comes up was, of a list of them was The Laws of Islamic Inheritance by Professor Abdul Halim. Mm-hmm. And everyone's like, okay, fair enough. But then in my mind, I was like, Professor Abdul Halim's a Quran translator.
Yeah.
He's not known for fiqh.
That's what came in my head.
Right? That's a straight way you think, right? But that thought would not cross your mind if you don't know Professor Abdul Halim is.
Exactly.
Right? If I had not read Muhammad Qasim Zaman's book, that thought would not cross my mind because I'm sure I'd know a book about Waqf that he wrote. So then I Googled it wasn't coming up, then asked it, said, oh, that was a mistake, we meant Professor al-ʿArif or something. I said, that's what we meant. So with these kind of sources, you have to have awareness of the field to be able to use it as good as possible. Now, why does this book become significant is that the author, Mufti Muadh, makes a very active attempt to give you bios of all the key figures that I mentioned. Mm. Right? So when you come, I'm randomly opening a page, right? So straight away, page 222, footnote 384, a brief biography of Hafiz al-Mizzi. Mm. Right? So then you read this, he's giving you a brief bio of Hafiz al-Mizzi. And another thing you have to give credit to Mufti Muadh for is that he brings in the Arabic text and he translates it as well. So you can see the Arabic text and you can see his translation. Mm. This shows 2 things. One is meticulousness in terms of I'm willing to show you my source and then translate it. Because sometimes if you hide the source and check it out, you get away with bad translations, right? Yeah. But you've got the Arabic text there. And secondly, it's easier for me to find that. Yeah. So if I want to find that Arabic, I can Google it, I can put it in Shamila, I can find the quotation.
You don't have to guess the Arabic of the English.
100%. So he's got that. So he's got these biographies in there, which are very, very useful. The main thing I would say for every student to read before you go to the second half of the book, or let's call it volume 1, I'm not sure volume 2 is going to be about, but what I've read mainly of is from the beginning, right? Is that he gives you an introduction to the key things of development of hadith, the writing down of hadith. And again, every hadith is referenced and the Arabic text is presented with translation. And he talks about the development. And whilst doing that, he's also responding to Orientalist claims about hadith. That's also found in here as well. It's a very rich, but at the same time, readable read. Readable read, yeah, that's a fine word, right? It's a readable read. So I would say every student in their 4th year, I'm going to put this for you guys as well, right? That you should at least spend, let's say, whatever year you're doing Dawrah in, whatever year you're doing Ulum Hadith in, so let's say it's 4th year, your holidays before, right, you spend, like I used to give you Ustaz Suhail Hanif's PhD on Hidayah before you do Hidayah. Similarly, before you start Ulum Hadith, just read the introduction work. And not only that, he's got a very, very good section. All right, I haven't got time to speak all of this, right? But a very good section about Madar. So basically the key figures of around who Hadith revolves around. So he talks about who they are, who they narrate from, so key sanads, and then you have these kind of very nice diagrams which lays out who these key figures are. So for the Madar, Amr ibn Dinar, who, how the main key narrator from them. What this makes it very useful, this can be done before Dawrah. So if you Dawrah Hadith, what happens is, because when you're doing Hadith, there's only Asanid, so many people you get mixed up, like who's this guy? So you start caring about the Isnad. If you can read and at least memorize the key narrators, which he's done for us here, like he's highlighted for the students here, quite easily, right? Then you know that, and straight away you can say, this is the Amr ibn Dinar, right? And this is what he spoke about, or this is this person he spoke about. You can have that for yourself, is very useful.
I think an added benefit of that then is, because of what I noticed in students that I interact with on a daily basis, students in various years at various levels, is that when they don't have this kind of experience of hadith at introductory level, when they get into Dawrah, or when they study hadith, they don't have an appreciation of the sanad. So the names don't mean anything to them. The significance of those names don't mean anything to them. Whether Sufyan al-Thawri or Sufyan ibn Uyayna narrated it doesn't mean anything to them. Whether it is, and even to the point where if it's narrated by at-Tirmidhī and he's quoting Imam Bukhari's comment on the illah of the hadith, it's not significant anymore, because it's like, I'm not here for that. I'm here for the matan. Like, just forget the sanad. I don't want to worry about it. But when you have that kind of thing in there, it's like, oh, you know what? That actually plays a part in the fiqh matan, and the matan of the hadith, the fiqh of the hadith. So that builds that kind of understanding for the student, which a lot of students miss out on.
So I'll give you an example, just one example, because the rest of the book then, it goes that it's quite similar to, it's taken a bit from Mufti ibn Malik's book on thing, but he's added a lot. Right? So not just a thing, but he's added a lot in here. I've not gone through this part meticulously, because there's a lot of book and details. This is more like a reference.
That's the second half of the book you're talking about.
Yeah, that's the bulk of the book, right? So it just basically goes through the key books on how to find hadith, so locate hadith, how to find the nature of the various hadith books, the nature of different types of hadith, qawli, fi'li, and how that affects you finding, locating them. And then you got about isnad, so the books of rijal, those books, how to utilize them. He's even got like screenshots of saying, okay, in this page, this is what's going on. And then at the end, many of them, he has a thing called Scan Me, where you can go to the PDF. I don't know how effective this would be, meaning in terms of a year later, would it still work?
They should.
Would it?
Yeah,
okay.
I don't think they have a time limit.
Whatever the case, but it's quite useful. So as students, you can actually scan it, you can find that work as well. So I'll give you just one example, right? So he's got on page 211, this is a random example, right? So you got the book Jāmiʿ al-Masanīd wa Sunan al-Hādī li Aqwam al-Sunan, right, by Ibn Kathir. That's Ibn Kathir's book. So at the bottom, he's taken the title from al-Unwan al-Sahih of Shaykh Hatim al-Auni. So you can see it's quite material, the title is taken from. But Shaykh Hatim's book, al-Unwan al-Sahih, is talking about the correct title. So it's taken from there. Then he says, Hafiz ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, gives death date, 774, Hijri, has written a book called Jāmiʿ al-Masanīd wa Sunan. And again, then he puts it in Arabic as well. So just in case you wonder. So like here, he said, li Aqwam Sunan, right? It's quite clear that it's not a mistake, because you can see the Arabic after this, Aqwam. He was inspired to compile this book after seeing the work of his teacher and father-in-law, Hafiz al-Mizzi. So you get extra information. Also, that Mizzi that we heard about, this is his son-in-law, Ibn Kathir.
And that's how they link together.
Yeah. Hafiz al-Mizzi, rahimahullah, in Tuhfat al-Ashraf, a book that we will soon discuss. So footnote 371, you can refer back to this as we're going to discuss. In this book, Hafiz ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, has taken the ahadith found in the following books and ordered them according to the Sahaba who have narrated them. So he lists the books: Musnad Ahmad, again Arabic is written, Musnad Abi Bakr al-Bazzar, Musnad Abi Ya'la al-Mawsili, Mu'jam al-Kabir. So if you're reading this, even if you don't understand everything, what it does is it familiarizes yourself with those names. And that's a key component of gaining any proficiency in any ulum, right? So when you hear names, okay, that sounds familiar. Now, if someone comes up and gives you like an Urdu source, you're like, what's that book? I don't know, I heard about that before, right? If you're not aware of it, that's a sign that maybe there's something off here. So that's why, like, you know, to an advanced level, for example, this is like just on a basic level, we can do that. So if you get to a level where someone cites a hadith book, and we're like, I never heard that book before, that becomes alarm bells. Yeah. Right? Whereas in the past, muhaddithun were the level that if someone narrates a hadith from Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and they haven't heard it or it sounds not like the message of Allah, they can even clock on that and say this is not prophetic.
And them saying La a'rifuhu would be like a statement to be considered late for later generations.
100%. So for us, what we can kind of build ourselves up to is like being aware of names and titles. So if someone comes and says, I'll give you an example, right? Just to make sense of this. So if you're reading this book now, you're not going to find, or I don't think you talk about like Ibn Abidin, great Imam of the Hanafi madhab, or Farad al-Muhtar. He's not known for being proficient in hadith or doing anything in hadith. So if I sat in a majlis and I said to you, this hadith is sahih, as stated by Ibn Abidin, right? Now, would you find that funny? No, you might have heard Ibn Abidin or Muhtar before, and that's okay, fair enough, right? But you know that doesn't make sense, right? It'd be strange because you'd be like, when Ibn Abidin started doing Tasheeh hadith, who's Tasheeh to do naqal of?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That's what you're going to think. So the reason why is because it's not because it can't happen, but you know that when it comes to that field, that's not a name that usually pops up.
It's not an authority that you know about. So it could be, but it's rare. Yeah. And that only comes from being proficient to a degree. And the more proficient you get, the more awareness you gain. Yeah. And this is what's very useful with these kind of books. Yeah. Okay, so by the way, today's part be very positive about every book, right? So it'll be a very positive podcast, inshallah. That's fine.
Any questions about this? I think because we haven't got that much time, so I'm just going.
No, I think right? We're good.
This is published by Maktab Ismail, Islamic Knowledge. So please do go and check out his content. Right. I think he's been doing shorts about other topics as well on his channel. Yeah. I saw on his WhatsApp status. That's the only social media platform on. So WhatsApp. So on Telegram as well. So I saw his WhatsApp status. So he's got a Telegram channel as well. And so do purchase a book, as I said to you guys before, especially these are all UK ulama we're doing today. So UK ulama, they're making effort, right? It's very easy to go and, you know, find mistakes and find error. Although I have not read it meticulously, but just seen the gist of it. These kind of books we should support. Yeah. And especially the one, if you think, for example, that it's a good endeavor, but you could do better, then you do better. It's no problem because it just adds to the quality of work. Definitely. Right? So this is very good endeavor. It's quite unique in that. So all students, I would say at least the first half of the first chapters of the book, do have a read of that.
Yeah. I think what the only thing I'll add, right, and this is a bit of a lighter side, is that I was having a discussion today, right, and someone was mentioning to me that, you don't praise anyone but yourself, right? Because it was in the context of me saying, oh, this guy I don't like. It's not someone that I listen to. It's not someone that I look up to as someone of authority and stuff. And they were saying, you don't look up to anyone apart from yourself. I said to him, no, that's not the case. I do have authorities and people that I look up to, scholars that I look up to. But when you study a little bit, even to a low degree, you start to realize how much nonsense people say, and your standard of accepting and being impressed becomes higher. Yeah. So when you see people making basic mistakes, you then realize, why is everyone impressed with him? He's nothing to be impressed about. Let's move on. So then that is what these kind of books have another. So
the only thing I would just add to that is because the reason why I made the active attempt to say, I'm going to try to be more positive, especially people making good efforts, is because I think you get to a stage where when you become so critical, it feels like you're being bitter and stuff, right? It's just like, you're bashing this person, you're bashing that book or that mistake, look at this mistake. And they deserve criticism, don't get me wrong. There are books and people, we've done many of those, right? But you just have to be careful that you don't get into this kind of cycle where you're just looking for blunders and then, because it's not, remember, every book will have blunders, right? Every book will have typos, every book will have issues with it, right? And they could always be better. And so it's important that nasiha is given, right? When nasiha is given. But that being said, you don't want to just be a negative guy. And I felt like I was sometimes falling into that because you get, and then I think whether knowingly or unknowingly, there becomes a level of arrogance. Like, all right, let me show you how to do it, right? I'll tell you how to do it. And it's not like that. That's not how scholarship should work. So what we want to try to do is if you want to, because we are lacking in the West or UK, let's say ulama, in terms of tasnif in writing, because we don't have that kind of training in writing, or we're not good writers, we're still working on that, we're developing that. When you get people writing significant volumes and making effort, and if I come along and I say, oh, I found, 4 mistakes, right, and he got this wrong, and he needs to rectify that, and a decent book and go on, what it does is that, 2-3 years a person spent on great khidmah that he's done,
you reduced
he just dismissed it within a statement. You
reduced it to 4 mistakes.
Yeah, and it's it's unfortunate. So I try to be very cautious and be very forgiving with those, especially those who are doing good work. If the argument you're making is wrong or is flawed and there's something like that, then I will be as critical as everyone else. Or if it's a case that there is a flaw which affects like the whole book.
Yeah.
So if he's, for example, throughout the whole book relied upon a dubious source, then I have to mention that, and that affects, even if he's taken 10 years writing it, he's going to be criticized because of dubious source.
It's a methodological
It's a fundamental methodological problem. So that's different. But otherwise, someone's making good effort, do khidmah and, writing books, etc. We should try to provide an environment of more positivity. And I'll add this, and this is what I put my first message to myself. If you want to be the critic, then you produce alternatives. All right? You want to be the big critic, you produce alternatives. So if I think, no, this is not good, then I'll produce alternatives.
As the scholars of the past did.
100%. So that's why, but that being said, I'm just saying the general point.
Yeah.
But this is a book that I would advise people to get. It's just a general point about how to do it. And I mentioned this before in the Telegram channels, those who are not aware. That's why I'm in line with that. I'm saying why I'm going to, especially these books who are being good efforts on a cause that we would agree on, these books are all positive works. It's just to kind of celebrate their scholarship. And we should all participate in purchasing these books. That's why I've actively, sometimes when I have the laptop open, I do have the book, right? Just in case you're wondering, right? I do have the book. It's just I have the laptop here. It just makes the notes easier. Because these ones I've got the notes in them, I've not bothered to use a laptop. But I do buy the book because you support the endeavor.
Definitely. Yeah. It makes it more financially viable for those who are producing these works to be able to produce more. And keeping in line with the English language works that we have, works in the English language, we have another one which is an explanation of Kitab al-Buyu', or the chapters of trade and commerce, as is translated on the title, in specifically the book Jāmiʿ at-Tirmidhī. And that is, the explanation is done by Mufti Taqi Usmani, and it's translated by Mufti ibn Adam, al-Kawthari, and he also adds his own annotations, etc., and comments. Now, Jāmiʿ at-Tirmidhī is a significant hadith work, focusing more on masail al-fiqhiyya, but also talking about ilal of hadith and stuff. Mufti Taqi himself is, very proficient and specializes in Islamic finance. Sits on many boards, has written a work on fiqh al-buyu', which is a contemporary work on modern Islamic finance, right? Now, and Mufti ibn Adam is one of his main students, you can say. Now, this book is, it's a very, the Jāmiʿ at-Tirmidhī is one of the final books that we study in the Dars Nizami kind of syllabus, and it's quite an advanced book which needs a lot of prerequisite knowledge. And I would assume even the explanation of the chapters of trade and commerce would require some prerequisite knowledge as well, right?
Yeah.
So now the same question applies to this, in the sense of what's the benefit of translating this book? What does it do for non-ulama, non-student, non-tulab? That gives it that special mīza.
So let's start with the book itself. So this is a book written by Mufti Taqi, or his lectures on Tirmidhī. It's an Urdu work called Dars Tirmidhī. A lot of mashayikh that teach Tirmidhī, you see it. It's this 3-volume Urdu work. And so what Mufti ibn Adam, who you can say is one of the closest associate Mufti Taqi in the UK. You might have other people that are closest students maybe, but in terms of closest to Mufti Taqi himself actively goes and, spends time and travels with him. Whenever he comes to Europe, Mufti ibn Adam is with him. And to be honest, when you speak to Mufti ibn Adam, and the few times I have, all he talks about Mufti Taqi. Right, that mahabba that Mufti ibn Adam has. You can't munazir because they live in different countries, but that mahabba, that ta'alluq, the connection that they have, I haven't seen much of that nowadays, because especially I think we in London don't have it as much, because we saw in our own lives the idea of having this kind of connection maybe is a bit more alien for us, but everything is revolves on Mufti Taqi, right? In essence, if any fatwa he gives, it's just a Mufti Taqi fatwa. And there's something that I want to answer about as well, because I remember years ago, I was having a conversation with a Ustad, and he mentioned this point. He goes like, why is Mufti Taqi so famous? right? What's so significant about Mufti Taqi Usmani? And at that time, this is many years ago, right? And I was saying, I was trying to think of an answer, like, why is he so famous? Because sometimes a person gains fame because always because of his dad, right? Mufti Muhammad Shafi, rahmatullahi alayhi, was a big scholar. And then, because of that, Mufti Taqi, but that wouldn't answer it. And he's always got books. Other people got books. So what's significant about Mufti Taqi? It's only when you start to read Mufti Taqi and you understand why he's such a giant that he is in Islamic ulum. There's a couple of qualities that Mufti Taqi Usmani has that are very unique. Number one is his insaf, is the idea of being just. So he's very cautious with the language he uses, right? Of course, that doesn't mean every answer is right. I'm just saying in general, the language he uses is just.
He doesn't speak in absolutes.
He doesn't speak absolutes. He's very nuanced. He's very well traveled.
Yes.
So therefore, his answers have this kind of, along with justice, but because it's well traveled, it's very well nuanced and very well thought through. So even when he's answering questions for people in America or in the UK, it's a very cautious answer of someone who's very much aware of the society.
He's informed of the context.
In contrast to other ulama sometimes who may be, as knowledgeable, maybe have read as much, but sometimes their answers are not like they're very, there's a gap between what they're saying and the reality on the ground. So Mufti Taqi, that's one quality of his which stands out. Insaf put a second quality in there as well, the awareness of the people around him, and that's why he can write. He's written English, Urdu, and Arabic. So you can see three key languages. Not only has he not translated in Urdu, these are translated, but he's got books. Sorry, not translated in English. He's also got books himself in English as well. He can speak English, and so that's the first issue. Second issue is Islamic finance. That Mufti Taqi, he became a scholar who engaged in Islamic finance on all contemporary issues, in providing answers to stuff that people were not finding answers for. So I give you an issue here, right? I'll give you an example. I want to write a book now in English on an introduction to ulum al-Hadith. Whether I think this is a good book or a bad book, it's made my task easy, right? If I write a book on ulum al-Hadith now, knowing that book's out there, I could rectify stuff. It could be good. You write one as well. Then he writes one. Then you're eventually going to come to a book which is very good. And when you come and go back to this book, you say, why was this book all that great for?
Yeah.
Right? Because we've got all these tahqiqat now. But people forget that this was one of the first that was written.
Yeah.
So when they were written and everyone made it easy for everyone else to masail, you're coming along and basically drinking from that, pool, not being aware that when there wasn't much there, this was a significant work.
He was the pioneer.
Exactly. So when you look at his book like Fiqh al-Buyu', it's not one of the examples you look back and it's not good. If you read Fiqh al-Buyu', you read his contemporary masail in Arabic, his stuff is in Urdu, you will see throughout it that there is a level of depth, and there's one of them, a separate point, in which he tackles contemporary issues through a way that is practical. If you should read his methodology, he talks about how his father would say that it's easy to say things are impermissible, but a real faqih is someone who can provide alternatives. I'm paraphrasing. They will provide alternatives. So him and his brother, Mufti Rafi Usmani, who passed away recently, they were both trying to say, okay, one is you can't do this, but how can we provide an alternative for you? So that's like what Mufti Taqi is all about. And the last thing I would say, and I never understood how significant this is, and this is something that the author, the translator Mufti ibn Adam also shares in. I used to never consider this as a significant thing. When you read Mufti Taqi, and you read even Mufti ibn Adam, his fatawa, when I used to read it, I said, this is very simple. Hanafi madhab says Maliki madhab, and they usually mention the madahib, they give a conclusion, this is quite easy. But when you realize that what they're doing is that they're taking sometimes a very abstract concept, ikhtilafat, etc., and in simple terms, providing a summary. That's an art. And you only know how hard that is when you try doing it.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's not too hard. And when I started writing, it's like the most confused jargon that I write, because I keep on writing like exceptions, I put a footnote in there, brackets, and I add this point and this nuance, and I just think, how do I explain? But then you read how smoothly Mufti Taqi has this ability of simplifying difficult concepts, right? It's an art form.
And it's a skill of the author when he makes a difficult concept, and a sign of his expertise, when he makes a difficult concept sound very simple.
Yeah. Because that's why, we have it sometimes in class, because some of the kitabs I've taught for quite a while, and you probably experienced that. In class, I would teach, I think I was taught for, let's say, 6-7 years now.
Yeah.
So, like Nur Anwar, I would teach, you guys experience Nur Anwar, and do that. Oh, it sounds so easy. But when it comes to exam time, I don't know what's going on. right? But for me, because it's the 6th time I'm teaching it, I feel quite comfortable, so I can quite easily just break it down. But everyone else is like, at that time, it's like, yeah, it's quite easy. When you go into exam, you have to open the kitab, like, I don't know what's going on here, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's just like a book. But Mufti Taqi, because of his proficiency, but it's an art form.
Yeah.
The ability to kind of simplify concepts. And there are some scholars that are just difficult writers.
Yeah.
Right? They are difficult writers. And I...
in history and contemporary.
100%. One thing I would notice is that because of ChatGPT, that's helped me a lot in terms of just be able to like write more basic. So it's not that, so it's like you write something, you put it in, they just smoothing it out. It helps a lot. That's one of the benefits of it, right? If you're asking, right? Just be careful with the change of text, but that's an art form. So that's something that stands out. Now, anyway, back to this work. So in the beginning, Mufti ibn Adam, he speaks about the preface of how he kind of got around to writing this work. Mufti Taqi himself has got a preface on him. And I think he has a team that actually checks out his books as well.
Just to clarify, Dars al-Tirmidhī is his written work, or is it?
It's written.
It's a written, so it's a formal written work.
No. So it was, he gave the Dars
yes.
and it was written down.
That's
so he's given the background to it here. He actually mentioned in the beginning, he goes, as for the lecture of the Honourable Shaykh Mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani, Hafidhahullah, they are a masterpiece of scholarship, precision and clarity. He is an expert, Mufti ibn Adam saying this now, right? He is an expert in presenting complex subject matters in a simplified, systematic and lucid manner. So Mufti ibn Adam does this in English as well, by the way. Even not just in here, like in translation, but you see his fatwa quite a lot like that as well. Such that it's easy to follow and understand. Islamic finance is a household topic for the Shaykh, having spent his entire life in its study, teaching, promotion, practical implementation. His lectures are not mere customary lessons, rather they combine knowledge, profound juristic insight, tafaqquh, wisdom and balance, hikmah and wa'itidal, spirituality, tazkiyah, understanding of current affairs, and a demonstration of true understanding of religion, alhamdulillah. Despite such levels of academic excellence and spiritual profundity, his humility led him to write the following introduction to al-Tirmidhī. This is translated of the introduction of the Mufti Taqi. For the last 10 years or so, this was written in 1980. Right, so last 10 years or so, I have been given the task to teach Jāmiʿ Tirmidhī at Jāmiʿ Darul Uloom Karachi. I have always felt that I do not possess the academic, ilmi, and spiritual amali capabilities required to teach hadith, and in no way worthy of accepting the responsibility of lecturing on hadith. However, given that this teaching post was assigned to me by my seniors, I regarded compliance as a good omen for the future and accepted to deliver this service, which is still ongoing. In the beginning, when I commenced the teaching of Jāmiʿ Tirmidhī, whilst trembling due to the full realization of my incompetence, I never imagined my wildest dreams that I would agree for my hadith lecture to be compiled and published. It was done by a student. The publication of such lectures only befit those who are actually worthy of it. Who am I? And what are my lectures that they should be published? Right. So that's the humbleness of Mufti Taqi in there as well. And then he talks about how it was eventually published. So what he's done is he's just taken the buyu' section. So not the full Dars al-Tirmidhī. It's just the buyu' section and translated that and he's added, not too much, but he's added footnotes. A lot of his footnotes of Mufti ibn Adam are from other books of Mufti Taqi. So for example, if he's written something here, he will say in Takmila Fathul Mulhim, which is his commentary of Sahih Muslim, where he completes the commentary of Mufti Shabir Usmani. He does Takmila, completion of that. So in there, there's discussions who reference that. If it's in Fatawa Usmani, who reference that. If it's in Fiqh al-Buyu', who reference that, Mufti ibn Adam. So what it does is, it allows you to kind of go to other works, so there's more detail, which is not found here. What I found very useful about this, I sat there and I bought this when he came down. Mufti ibn Adam Taqi was here last year. He did a program in Regent's Park Masjid. Mufti ibn Adam was there. Yeah. So that's where they were selling this, and I purchased it. And on the way back from I was coming back from on the train, I started reading it there, and it's a very good read. I'll tell you why. Two reasons, right? One is that there's a lot of concepts and ideas that you hear about in Islamic finance, but you don't know where it originates from, for example, right? So if you're not aware of where this idea or concept originates from, having it done in the structure of hadith with commentary, it gets you a direct realization of how this mas'ala, this topic, is taken from the hadith.
Yes.
Right? So you straight away say, okay, is this hadith? That's why they say this.
Yes.
Right? Number two is that when there are ikhtilaf and the hadith is there, Mufti Taqi, he provides the contrary evidences, so you get to see why the ikhtilaf is there. So you're not just stuck with random different opinions. So like normally in Fatawa, they just mention the ikhtilaf. Shafi say, Maliki say this, and this is allowed according to them. You don't know the reason. You don't know the reason. So because it's structured around the hadith, and then it's evidence-based, Mufti Taqi Usmani, he mentions the ikhtilaf of the madahib through the lens of that point. Right? So that's point number one. Number two, because it's a field that Mufti Taqi himself is proficient in, he gives his opinions on there as well.
Yes.
And what's very fascinating with this is not only, does he mention, of course, the Hanafi position usually sides with it, but there are examples where he would accept, because this is one of the signs or one of the qualities of the ulama of Deoband specifically, right? The ulama of Deoband were those who were active in the field of hadith when defending the madhab. But what you find, and you'll find probably examples for nearly all of them, where through their analysis of hadith, because they were scholars that were engaged in hadith, they sometimes got to a conundrum where the hadith seems to be suggesting one thing, one madhab's position more strongly, and the Hanafi madhab, as I understand it, is to the contrary. So you see sometimes they will say, okay, well, I think we should incline towards the hadith here. Or depending on the nature of the scholar, someone like Shaykh Yunus rahmatullahi alayhi was much more forceful in saying just go with the hadith and give preference. Yeah. Some scholars will be willing to try to find a combination, like al-Kashmīrī, we've got a lot of trying to find reconciliation. Others would say, okay, I think I'll stick to the madhab, others stick to the hadith. But what you find, because it's engaged, the Deobandi school, because it does the Dawra hadith method, a lot of the teachers, the Shaykh hadith, they're going to engage in hadith day in, day out. Yes. So they naturally have, without even trying, it's going to impact the way you do fiqh.
Of course. So
what you find Mufti Taqi when he does this is not only does he break down issues of Islamic finance, but he actually gives preference to views. And there's like various examples of where he would say, this point, I would say that, so for example.
And while you're finding an example, I think a point that I think should not be missed by the viewers here is that if these were lessons that he dictated and the student wrote them down, and obviously they would want to go through an editing process and a refining process, but if the work reads good in a written form, then that means that the verbal speech that he was saying in his moment must have been 100%. Very good 100%. To have been able to explain these concepts in the way he did. Yeah, 100%. That's amazing.
So I'll give you an example, right? So you have this famous discussion within fiqh, which is talking about, but there's a lot of contemporary issues you can go into it. I'm not going to read through it, but it's a highly advised. Anyone who's interested in Islamic finance, even if you not, so especially those who are don't understand a lot of it, so the technical terms, etc., right? Not in the field so much. It's very good because it breaks it a lot down. And then even places where it might not be fully, the Mufti ibn Adam does help in adding useful notes, annotations, right? Not just referencing Mufti Taqi's work. So it's very useful like that. So I give an example. You might remember it's called regarding the hadith of Musarrat. Musarrat refers to the chapter regarding the animal that was not milked, right? And the hadith, and in the hadith, the Arabic text is mentioned with the grading of Imam Tirmidhī. So that's mentioned in the Arabic text, and then that's translated as well. So for example, the hadith mentions that the Prophet ﷺ said, so not the whole isnad, is Abu Hurairah from Nabi ﷺ, من اشترى مسراتا فهو بالخيار إذا حلبها إن شاء ردها ورد معها صاع من تمر. Then Imam Tirmidhī says, hadithun hasanun sahih. So then the hadith is translated, Mufti ibn Adam. Sayyiduna Abu Hurairah narrates that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, whoever purchases a she-goat that was left unmilked, musarrat, has an option when he milks it. If he wishes, he may return it to the seller for a refund and 1 sa' of dried dates along with it. Then he says Hasan Sahih, and then what? Because it's from Tirmidhī, in the footnote is added what other books is mentioned. So this is in Bukhari and Muslim as well. So therefore, if you're saying, oh, it's Tirmidhī, what the Bukhari Muslim? If it's Hadith Bukhari Muslim, they reference it. So this Hadith is Bukhari Muslim as well. What's the problem with this narration? What was it problem in terms of what's the fiqhi conundrum here? Is that the Hadith is saying that if there is a she-goat, and what they will do sometimes is that I will not milk my she-goat. So it's called musarra. I will not milk him. And then after, okay, I'm going to sell it to you. So when you come the next day, the udder is full. So you look at that and say, it gives a lot of milk. And then you test it out, a lot of milk is given. So you give me, let's say, £1,000 for it, although it's worth £800 or something. So you purchase for £1,000, you take it, and then the next day you milk it, it comes less. You might milk it again, it's still less. You go, oh, I got cheated here. So what do? You go back, and then I have to give you the £1,000 back, you take the animal. But what the hadith adds at the end is, you have to give me, the one you purchased from me, 1 sa', which is a measurement of dry dates. What's that for? Because of the milk that you used. What's the problem here in the Hanif of Imam Hanifa is that we learn from the Quran and the general principle of Sharia that when something has been misused or used, etc., something that's similar has to give back to me. How can 1 sa' of dates always take the presence of however much milk you used? It's not going to be the same. So it's not fair that's distributed. So either you use too much milk or more milk you use. or you gave me too many dates, or whatever, one or the other way, right?
Yeah.
So unfairness is found.
Yeah.
So then he provides his explanation. So then what Mufti Taqi does is he goes through this bahath in great detail, right? So he goes through a bahath in great detail, mentioning the opinions of Imam Shafi'i, Imam Abu Hanifa, then bin Didna Madhab, Imam Abu Yusuf, and Imam Muhammad. And at the end, Mufti Taqi then prefers the position of Imam Hanifa here.
Mm-hmm.
He says that Imam Abu Yusuf's position here, you can read what it is more accurate. I'm going to read it. He said, the last line he says, the position of Imam Abu Yusuf seems very balanced and logical. And the footnote is added. In other words, according to Imam Abu Yusuf, paying one sa' of dates under all circumstances, regardless of how much milk is extracted used, defies logic. Therefore, the buyer will pay the price of the milk used. However, this price also does not fully reflect the buyer's usage of milk, because some of the milk was produced whilst the animal was in his ownership. Thus, along with paying the milk's price, both parties should forgive each other for any shortfall. Allah knows best. So Imam Abu Yusuf, he has this middle stance, because Imam Hanifa says, well, you can't give anything, because you can't quantify how much milk you used. So he goes, no, you work out how much it was, and you give that, rather than just one sa'. So he's not accepting the one sa' example, because he goes, that doesn't coincide the rules of Sharia. But just to dismiss it completely, Imam Hanifa says, that seems to just stretch Mufti Taqi. So he prefers Imam Abu Yusuf's view.
Yeah.
Right? Again, doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but he does this and he meticulously goes through this. And I've made references throughout the book. So
I think that whole kind of being clear in the justification and explanation is very key, because discussing positions and then just doing tarjih of one or the other without fully elucidating on the position itself makes it very difficult for a student.
There's like examples where he's like said, evidence-wise, the Imam Shafi'i qawl makes sense, but practically it's very difficult. Imam Hanifa ones make more sense.
Yeah.
Right, so you have this kind of, so you have all sorts, but what you do is, so what you find is that you start to appreciate how fatwa are given.
Yeah.
So sometimes for the outsider, it might seem very arbitrary. So they will say stuff like, why are mortgages haram, but then in car insurance allowed? What's a greater need, car or a house? And it sounds like a very strong argument, but then when you go through how we got to that conclusion and how we got to this conclusion, you will see there's a different logic being utilized. And then you appreciate why there's an ikhtilaf.
Exactly.
Right? And this is what these books do. So it's in English, it's reader friendly. Right? So at least for students of knowledge, even non-students of knowledge that are kind of clued on with some Islamic terminology and stuff, I think you will benefit, especially those who have interest in Islamic finance.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's an important book. This is part of Turath. I would advise reading this book.
Okay, and just moving with the same kind of train of thought, you have an Arabic work now.
Yes.
And it's in the same kind of vein, in the sense that it's a dictated work, originally dictated notes or explanations done, and the student has recorded it, but it's in Arabic now.
Yeah.
And this is now on the Sunan of Abu Dawud, and the person who's actually edited and done the annotations and then published it, I think it's through Maktab Ismail.
No, this is Dar al-Fath.
Dar al-Fath, right, is Maulana Maḥfūẓ Aḥmad. Now, this is called the Amali of the Sunan of Abi Dawud. The Amali genre is something which is quite popular in the subcontinent, right? Why is
this technically comes with Amali as well?
Exactly, yeah. So why is the style of the Amali? Why would a person use those kind of books in trying to study Sunan Abi Dawud or Sunan Tirmidhī?
Well, Amali in general, what it does is that not everyone's a writer.
Yeah.
Right? So someone specifically, like Mufti Taqi does write a lot. He got Tasnīf, but Allāmah Anwar Shāh, who we're talking about now, wasn't someone that would write a lot. That wasn't his thing, but his hadith lectures were like super famous.
Yeah.
Because of the depth that you found in him. So many of his students kind of would flock towards Allāmah Anwar Shāh. So we're talking here at the beginning of the 20th century. All right, so in the 1910s, 20s, that's when he was at his peak of his teaching of hadith in Darul Deoband, then he went to Dabel after. That he was, his people would flock just to go to his Bukhari dars, his Abu Dawud dars, and other lecture hadith books that he would teach. And so that depth and detail he would provide in there, many of the students would go and try to document that. The most famous attempt of the dictations of Allāmah Anwar Shāh Kashmīrī, rahmatullahi alayhi, is the Faydul Bari, which is a commentary of Sahih Bukhari. This was done by Badr Alam Mirthi. Badr Alam Mirthi himself is a competent scholar. So he wrote a hashiyah to it as well. If you're talking about the most reliable dictations of Imam Allāmah Kashmīrī, then the book of Faith al-Bari is still the most meticulous. So you have Arf al-Shadi, which is his notes on Jāmiʿ Tirmidhī by a different student. I can't remember the name right now off the top of my head, which is not as meticulous. Right? And then Jāmiʿ Tirmidhī, Arf al-Shadi, then there's a further commentary by one of Yusuf Banoli, who's a student of al-Kashmīrī, called Ma'arif al-Sunan. 6 volumes of this has been done. That kind of extrapolates further detail from al-Kashmīrī's notes. So it becomes on commentary. And then you have al-Kashmīrī's own works. His own works are like on Witr, on Raf' al-Yadayn. You remember we spoke about this in the engineering episode. Ikfar al-Mulhideen, which is about takfir of the Qadiyanis. You got Mushkilat al-Quran, verse of the Quran. Some provide difficulty, explains it. So you got these kind of books and a few other books as well.
So now question, what's the style that we can get from Allama Anwar Shāh Kashmīrī from his Amali? Like what was his style in Hadith?
So let's break this down, right? Yeah. So first we begin is that there's a book coming out hopefully soon, or it's an article or book/book, right, by Mufti Muhammad Zaman, we spoke about before, you remember, where he does like a comparison in English between Allama Anwar Shāh Kashmīrī and Imam Zayd al-Kawthari. So like a comparison of the methodology. So in English, if you're interested in like seeing comparison of methodology, you can see that. In my dissertation, I also discussed Allama Kashmīrī as well. So you can see my PhD dissertation, some of his ideas and methods I've mentioned in terms of write-ups.
Shameless plug.
Sorry?
Shameless plug.
Shameless?
Plug.
What does that mean?
You don't get the meme? It's like when you self-advertise.
Oh, all right. Shameless.
Well, wait, that's the meme. I'm not saying shameless.
It sounds like that.
Astaghfirullah, that's what's Taqi.
Yeah, let's edit that out. I'm joking. No, it's fine. It makes you look bad. I look like the innocent Shaykh. All right.
I'm just a bad student.
Yeah, I'm guessing right. I actually knew what that meant.
Oh no.
I actually knew what that meant. So anyway, so Allama Kashmīrī, what his methodology is, right? So these are the books I read. Now, what's interesting is Maḥfūẓ Aḥmad, he's actually based in East London, very active, and he's written works in Arabic, and he's actually got a separate work on the al-Amali Allama Anwar Shāh Kashmīrī. What he does in that book is that he actually finds useful points, beneficial points of Allama Kashmīrī in his books, and he gathers them together into one work. Right? So that's already been done some years back, probably Darul Fath as well. What he's done here is that one of the scholars based in Bangladesh, Shaykh Muḥammad Ẓuhūr al-Ḥaqq as-Silhati, who's based in Bangladesh, right? He had notes on Allama Kashmīrī in his Sunnah bi Dawud lessons. So that was kind of preserved within the family. And so then Maḥfūẓ Aḥmad, when he went to Bangladesh, he talks about it, so he kind of was shown it. So he goes, okay, I'll work on it, or they told him to work on it, and he worked on it. So that he typed that up, and he not that many footnotes. There's not that. There is actually, he does like if there's something that he mentions on Allama Kashmīrī, which you can find in his Faith al-Bari or in one of Maḥfūz's book, he puts some more details in there, right? And there's some places he adds footnotes about some other detail, right? But what you basically have in this book is then that typed up. Yeah, it wasn't an easy task. I spoke to Maulana about it as well. He goes, it was a bit of a difficult task because sometimes Muhammad Ẓuhūr al-Ḥaqq, rahmatullah alayhi, has some of his notes in there as well. So you have to kind of distinguish what he's writing, what's writing. And sometimes there's places which are you can't basically work out what's being written, right? Now, is this a reliable? Can you reliably attribute this to Allama Kashmīrī? That's a question you're going to ask, right? Yeah. Without me, going into looking into who Muhammad Ẓuhūr al-Ḥaqq is and doubting anything, I'm being skeptical about it. But you read it, the style is Allama Kashmīrī's style. Yeah. The arguments of Allama Kashmīrī, his method, like the unique points that he has in Faith al-Bari, you'll find it here as well. So like I'll give you an example, right? Allama Kashmīrī, rahmatullah alayhi, many of when it comes to Hanafi madhab, because he was so engaged in Hadith, right? Many of his takes of the Hanafi madhab are read within the lens of Hadith. So it's not he's giving preference to outside the madhab, although sometimes what you find is he'll say, the Hanafis give this argument, they give the argument, it's a strong argument, and he'll leave it at that. It doesn't even doesn't take it, but he's mentioned that's a good argument they got here, right? Or they got a bad argument. So he's dealing with this as like in class, as just like a mujtahid basically, right? Yeah. Just engaging with the evidences. That's a weak evidence, there's a strong evidence. There's a good point here, not a great point here, and he challenges everyone. That's the way he operates, right? And so there are some points of Allama Kashmīrī which are quite unique to him. So I've noted again, if you were to do this, it'd be like an 8-hour podcast, to be honest, right? I think I have about 50, 60 notes on the various parts that Allama Kashmīrī highlighted as well. But I'm going to give you some summary of some of the ideas and I'll tell you some of the issues of the book, inshallah. So, for example, in the Hanafi madhab, Imam Abu Hanifa, his view regarding Asr Salah, right? Regarding Asr Salah, is it mithl al-awwal or mithl al-thani? When does Asr begin? Right? Now, the famous riwayah from Abu Hanifa is what? Mithlain. Right? But mithlain, it goes against what seems to go against certain hadith, and it also jumhur ulama, major ulama on one side. But there's another riwayah of Abu Hanifa which has it as mithl al-awwal. But this riwayah, in terms of who transmits, is not as strong as it was in the Zahiri riwayah, which is the mainstream transmission in the famous books of Imam Muhammad, that is as mithlain. So what does Allama Kashmīrī do? Allama Kashmīrī says, well, there's a concept called waqt al-mushtarak, a shared time. So what he argues is that it seems like Imam Hanifa's view is that between mithl awwal and mithlain, between those two times for the time periods of mithl, meaning one shadow length, two shadow length, right? There's a shared time between Asr and Dhuhr. It's a shared time between Dhuhr and Asr. So he presents that as his analysis. You find that in Faith al-Bari, you find it here as well. Right? And similar arguments, but what's beneficial is that sometimes he extends upon arguments, expands upon points. That you don't find him expanded upon there. Right? I've noted a number of points. Now, what I'll do, rather than having to spend so much time in the podcast, on the Telegram channel, I'll upload interesting nuggets information. Right? So that will save us from having to, go through a lot of them here. One of the things I would say, because I do understand, there's two things I would say here. And one is, one of the difficulties of the book is that the hadith of Sunan Abi Dawud, the first hadith seems to be mentioned. And then Allama Kashmīrī is doing commentary of a range of hadith, but many of the commentaries he's doing hadith of is not mentioned in the matan. So if you have it like this, you can see that, right? The main hadith, then he'll commentate. But when he's commentating, he goes into the next hadith he's commentating about. But that matan he's not found. So what you're going to have to do if you want to use this book and benefit from it is have Sunan Abi Dawud with it.
Of course.
Okay, because you can't just wrap it. You have to have Sunan Abi Dawud with it. Right? Contrary to Faith al-Bari, which has the Sahih Bukhari in there. Arf al-Shadhi is usually published with the Jāmiʿ at-Tirmidhī, so you can just follow it.
Which is another stylistic point about the way he used to teach. He would do something.
No, I think that's more to do with the editor.
Oh, okay.
The way they did it. So I think if you want to enhance this book, although we make it much more larger, because we have to include Sunan Abi Dawud in here, it would make it larger, but it's going to be, I think it's worth it. Because what happened many times was that I'll look at it, what's he referring to here? Because it's qawluhu, he said, and the word, and it's not in the main hadith. So it's the second or third hadith. So that's why it became a bit difficult to follow. And it's not the whole Sunan Abi Dawud, right? So the last chapter, it goes up to Kitab al-Buyu' Babu Nahi an al-Bay'i fil Masjid. That's the last chapter of Allama Kashmīrī. And then Allama Kashmīrī, this is not with one of the issues of Amali's dictations, right? That's just one, I would say, useful thing to say. And he's made a good effort. So what I would say is Maḥfūẓ, what he's done here, we respect it. There's a few other ones of Amalis of Imam Allama Kashmīrī that have been published in which have been very poor editions on Sahih Bukhari. There's no problem Muqaddimah. I've got a copy of it. It's been very difficult to follow it. It does seem like it's from Allama Kashmīrī as well, but I've not really looked into it too deeper. It's not very nicely printed. This is very nicely printed. A lot of efforts we made into it. That correction, I would say, and there are some typos I found here and there. But overall, this is a significant contribution that I learned a lot about Allama Kashmīrī that I didn't know about before. One of the things I found very interesting, and I actually asked Maḥfūẓ about this as well, is that in this book, you notice, and I highlighted it all the way, that when he talks about Ahlul Hadith, he talks about it very negatively, very harsh. Right? So like he was talking about Sadiq Hasan Khan, and they will call him like Jahil, and like these kind of names are very dismissive of them. And so this could either be like in class, he was like very harsh against him, like he was just dismissing the ideas. Whether it was, I don't think it was the editor, right? But it does seem like, but you don't really find that same tone in his other works. Although you find suggestions of it, like the way he talks about Muhammad al-Wahhab and Faith al-Bari is very like, harsh in his tone with that. So, that's something which I found quite unique in that. There's a number of unique arguments. So what I'll do, I'll put relevant parts up on the Telegram channel, something useful that I've found, and then others can benefit from it, inshallah. But again, those who are studying Sunan Abi Dawud, or those who are interested in Allama Kashmīrī, there's a bunch of beneficial points in here. About fiqh issues, if you're interested in like Hanafi evidences, unique evidences. You see, with Mufti Taqi, most of the evidences that he goes through are like the mainstream Hanafi evidences and insights. With Allama Kashmīrī, he provides insights from himself, like narrations that are not normally thought about, and he will provide Hanafi usul on them. So it's very interesting. If you want to really engage with like a proper muhaqqiq, you're going to have that. But with an Amali, you only discuss those parts of the hadith which are relevant to the dars.
Yes.
So it's not like a sharh.
Yes.
So if you find like a part in a hadith, I wonder what he says about this.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily going to find a commentary by al-Kashmīrī.
Definitely.
Right? That happens with Faith al-Bari as well. So you're looking interested in Faith al-Bari, you're going with Sahih Bukhari, which is the best commentary, most accurate of al-Kashmīrī. You'll find that you're not necessarily going to find what you're looking for.
You're going there expecting to find only رؤوس المسائل.
Yeah, or whatever interests him. So it could be sometimes quite random points. Whereas if you're looking at Fath al-Bari, like in here, there's a bunch of like interesting nuggets of information.
Yeah.
Books that he found. He will talk about scholars and what he thinks about them. And this is a good scholar. Ibn Daqiq al-Eid is a great scholar. This guy, not so much. And we'll mention like, Zayla'i he praises and something. He's got all of this going on here. So there's a lot of benefit like that. Whereas if you do read something like Fath al-Bari or Umdat al-Qari on Sahih Bukhari, for example, right? Or even like Munakhin al-Sahan for his Badr al-Majhood. These are written as fully fledged commentaries with the purpose of commenting on the hadith. So therefore, you're going to find what you're looking for. If it's a rijal or whatever, you're most likely going to find it in the commentary. These are not like that. So don't expect it to be like that. Read it in terms of for fawaid benefits. If you're teaching it, it's nice to have. You can mention some of the fawaid of al-Kashmīrī. But this does, alhamdulillah, add to the library of the ideas of al-Kashmīrī. So what's needed now, and I think Maḥfūẓ is going to plan to work on it, inshallah, give him tawfiq, is to kind of get all these works together and like either write like a major dissertation type thing of the thoughts and ideas of al-Kashmīrī. There are some works already out there like that. I made dissertations comparing Fath al-Bari with Fath al-Bari and such works like that in Urdu as well. That's in Arabic, that's MA dissertation. There's Urdu works as well, al-Kashmīrī as well. But with these newer works coming in, the other Pakistani print of the Sahih Bukhari Amali that's come out for quite some years ago, put those all together, see what the findings are, how accurate it is, how meticulous it is, how much did the editors have a hand in it, those kind of stuff. Because there is a question about Fath al-Bari that some scholars, Manzoor Nu'mani suggested, of later hands. It's a long debate about Wahhabism, but we don't have time right now.
Okay, so my laptop has run out of battery.
Your laptop is fine.
Yeah, it's good. So we can carry on to the next book. The title's in front of you, but Sharh al-Qawaid al-Fiqhiyya, which is... Okay,
I haven't... I just briefly went through this, right? Because I did have a student gave this to me as a gift from the author. This is written by... explanation done by Muawiyah bin Mufti Muhammad.
Yes.
He's a teacher at Dawud Blackburn.
Yes.
Right. This is called Sharh Qawa'id Fiqhiyya min Mujallati Ahkam al-Adiliyya, a translation and elucidation of 99 foundational fiqh maxims from the Ottoman Civil Code, Majalla Ahkam al-Adiliyya. Muawiyah bin Mufti Muhammad. Mufti Muhammad, Hafidhullah, is the head teacher of Dawud Blackburn.
Yep.
Jāmiʿ al-Huda, and this is his son.
Yeah.
His son has done a lot of work on the syllabus of Darul Dars al-Nizami, and most of the people that are in Madaris, they've probably seen some of his books, like on Hidayat al-Nahwu. He's got on the collection of Hadith, I think he's got a bunch of stuff, right?
He's got on Diwan al-Shafi'i, a lot of books.
Yeah, so this is like a few new ones that have come out.
Yeah.
I've got both of them he gave to me. This is the one that I was just briefly going through. And from the look of it, it's very nice. It just basically goes through Qawaid that I find from the famous Majalla, Ottoman Majalla.
Yeah.
99 of them. And so I just go for random pages. I haven't, again, like Mufti Muadh has put the Arabic text for the Qaida as well. So al-umur bi maqasidiha. So let's say that's page, it's got introduction as well to Qawaid al-Fiqh, what that means. Page 22, so just give you an example. So we have al-umur bi maqasidiha. The actions and statements are judged by intentions. That's a rule. It's a maxim. So these maxims underlie ahkam.
Yes.
So we have rules in the Sharia who say, what's the maqsid behind it? And sometimes there's various types of maxims at play, and some of the maxims clash. So that's where the faqih, that's proper faqaha that needs to come in there to try to unravel that.
Yeah.
So he will say, for example, he goes, explanation, the ruling on a person's action or words depends on the intention, not just the outward action or statement. That's explanation. And then what's very useful is examples.
Yeah.
So then he says, for example, I'll give you one example, right? If someone states, I have bought this woman, right, but actually intends marriage with her, right? The marriage will take place with the woman's consent, not a purchase or financial transaction. The intention of the speaker determines the outcome. So amur maqasidiya. This is when you use the word bay' to marry, because there's an element of milku buda'a.
Yes.
Right? I'll let you guys look at the dictionary what that means. Right? Or let's do a bit more of a...
and if anyone wants to get married in that way,
don't do it. Yeah.
Be careful.
If someone places a bucket to collect water, the water becomes theirs only if they intend to gather it. If they never intend to gather it, the water remains unacclaimed. Anyone can take it. You put a bucket out. So al-umul maqasis, your intention matters. These are masal, your intentions matter.
Yeah.
And then it's going to go through a bunch of other stuff. So it's like this for students of knowledge, especially those into doing iftar, or just in general, fiqh, understanding it. It's a very useful. It's got examples in here. I would advise you guys to check. I've just gone through brief sections. I don't have much time. From what I read, it's very clear. Again, one of the books that is newly come out. Very much advise students to get it.
Just on these English works, because we're kind of finished with the English works and one more book left, right? Is there's kind of two things that before I used to be very against advanced concepts and works being translated because of the prerequisites you require to fully understand them. But I find that as I've now grown up a bit, I've seen that there's two kind of benefits that you can get from these kind of books. One is that it makes it accessible for the learner in a way that he can go away and fully understand things or get a better understanding of things and then refer back to his teacher to get clarification, etc. in a much more easier fashion. And number two is that it also exposes to the average reader, the average Muslim, the kind of value they need to have for the ulama and the ilm that the ulama have. That, you're not going to very easily understand these things as an average reader, but just trying to access it in the English language, you're like, whoa, this is quite deep.
I think I was actually speaking to this morning with Mufti Muhammad Zaman about this translation thing, and we kind of shared it. He mentioned this as well, and it came. The realization came to me as well, because I was very critical about these in the past. I still am for a lot of them, but one of the benefits that he mentioned as well, and I agree with him, that he goes, one of the benefits of these translations is that it acts as a sharh. So even the translation, many a times a translation may help us understand the masla better.
Yes, that's true.
Right, so even the Muslim in Arabic, we understand the translation. So we think of translation, but when you get a proper translation and sometimes examples in English that we can relate to, you feel, okay, I actually understand the Masala much more better. I'll give you another example, which has been more easy. I just found the one more interesting, right? The Qaida number 32, page 86, is al-Idtiraru la yubtilu haqq al-ghayr. That necessity does not nullify the rights of others. And he explains it, he gives an example. He goes, if Muhammad is starving and eats Yusuf's food to save his life, he is allowed to do so. However, he must repay Yusuf for the food when he's able to.
Yes.
Because that's still your right. So if I'm starving and I've eaten your food, okay, I've done that to keep myself alive. And if you come back and say, you'll be quite able to say it, right? But if you come back and say, you need to pay for that food, right? Then I must pay for your food.
Yes.
Because just because of my necessity doesn't mean I can take your right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that applies to Israel. Yeah? Just because you have the Holocaust doesn't mean you can take someone else's land.
and commit your own.
This is application of Qawa'id in live action.
And then we have a final book.
Yes.
One more final book to do with the issue to do with the finality of the Prophet ﷺ.
So it's been quite a range of topics, right? So this is a book written. So what's happened in this book? Okay, so it's called Hadiyatul Mahdiyyin في آية خاتم النبيين by Mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani, rahmatullah alayhi, which is the father of Mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani. But then, so this book is already, if you go online, there's a soft copy of the early edition of it. And then you have with it Sifatul Safwa fi Khatam al-Nubuwah, right, which is a separate work. This is written by Dr. Yusuf Shabir Ahmed Britani. This is Mawlana Yusuf Shabir. If you remember, we reviewed his book on Hidayah, Ghaib Hadith Hidayah, the second episode, I think. It's been quite a while, right? Al-Inayah, which is a very exhaustive work looking at the Gharib Hadith of Hidayah.
Yeah.
So what he's done here is that he's collected. So you got Mufti Shafi's book, where he took. So this all goes back to Qadiyanis.
Yeah.
Right? The Qadiyani movement, which is a guy by the name of Mirza Ghulam Ahmed, who claims prophethood and a whole host of other things. And so the ulama were very active in fighting this fitna, and they were getting a lot of supporters, right? I have like an interesting, I don't know if it's interesting, but I have like my perspective on Qadianism, and I'll put in the Shi'ism as well, not in the concept of the same, right? Because Shi'ism, there's various, but Qadianism more or less agreed upon in the Kufr, but just in terms of how I deal with their theology. So I was mentioned this before as well, that when I teach about Qadianis, when I teach about Shi'ism, I believe, and you may have other views on this, right? I believe that merely explaining their view properly is as sufficient as a refutation. Because when you explain it, it doesn't make sense, and it's so ridiculous that I don't have to do rad on it.
Yeah. Right? Because it goes against things which are ma'loom bid-darura.
No, but rationally, like, I'll give you an example, right? Let's start with Shi'ism, for example. So we say, okay, what's the da'wah? What's the claim? So the da'wah is that, well, there's a fundamental aspect of deen that you guys have missed out. What's that fundamental aspect? Is imamah. That the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, before he passed away, Allah Ta'ala had ordained that Ali radiallahu anhu would be the Khalifa. So that's imamah. Okay, great. So when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passes away, this core aspect of deen was then rejected by the Sahaba, and they appointed Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman radiallahu anhum. You say yes? Okay, yeah. That's what you believe, right? Okay. This imam is such a core concept. Is it in the Quran? Right? So now you say, no, it's not in the Quran, it's alluded in the Quran. Or a better cop-out is that it was in the Quran, right? But it's been taken out, right? So, okay, that's what you believe. All right, so now, I'm not refuting it, right? So that's what your response is. Okay, great. So it's either alluded to. So if I was to give you a mushaf, and you don't know anything about Shi'ism, Sunnism, right? You get anyone. Yeah. You get al-Kafir, right? Say, can you read this translation? Would they ever come away with the concept of imamah?
No.
Right? Would anyone come with the concept of imamah? Put in the Qadiyanism as well. Would you ever think of Qadian, India, Kashmir, Mirza Ghulam, anything like that by reading the mushaf?
No.
Right? If someone turns to us and says, what would you learn then? You learn about Allah, learn about the messengers. You will learn about resurrection. You will learn about
a final messenger.
You learn a bunch of stuff, right? The stories of Pras, you learn about ahkam, you learn about mirath, right? You learn about hudud. This is all there. If someone wants to come and say, what about your Sunni views about sifat? We accept that sifat is a debate amongst Ahl Sunnah, which is not explicit in the Quran. We have to derive that. Right? Some of it is more clear than others.
Yes.
But the details of that, like the khalqiyya of the Quran, we accept that there's a form of istinbat taking place. Right? But we're not doing takfir of Sahaba or something based upon not knowing khalq Quran or not being aware of the debate. But you're saying it's a core aspect of deen, right? Yeah. Let's carry on. So when we talk about Shi'ism, you say, so why did not Ali ibn Abi Talib take up arms against Abu Bakr and Umar? So the answer will be, I can only think of maslahah. Right? Because the public good, Ali did not choose to take up arms. Not a refutation, just a question. Right? So when, in your words, the two, people who usurped Khilafah, they are alive still. So Ali radiallahu anhu, out of maslahah, doesn't fight them. Yes. So when those two people are now passed away, for what maslahah are you against them? Does that make sense, right? So if, for example, like you're in front of me and I say, look, just for the public good, I'm not going to attack you. But now you're dead and gone, right? Your fitna and stuff apparently is gone now. And I'm, training every day, like, I'm going to take this guy out. When you were there, you didn't do anything. And now you're going, why has it become so big problem? Why are you taking it up now? A simple question. I'm putting your view forward, not refuting it, just asking you this question. Right? And you can go through it, and it gets worse, doesn't get better. Because you have the imamah, then you have the 12th imam who's born, then it goes into ghaybat al-sughra, ghaybat al-kubra. Go read the story. Right? And when you read that, which is now basically tashri'is, or the wahi is still continuing in terms of it's still, deen is still ongoing basically. For us, for example, when it comes to mushajarat al-sahaba, the disputes of Jamal, Siffin, etc., we say to people, you can have pure iman without even knowing what's going on. But this is still aqa'id for you, still belief for you. So the question is that when someone reads the Quran, would they know about imams? Would that message come to? Otherwise, what ends up happening with both Qadianism and Shi'ism, you have to believe in a mass conspiracy. Right? You have to be a mass conspiracy theory. So now we go to Qadianism, we just push on that for a second, right? So you don't get Mirza Ghulam in there. You say, okay, Mirza Ghulam is the Messiah. You say, yes, but the Messiah in the Hadith, because you accept the Hadith, is Isa alayhi salam. So yes, there's Isa alayhi salam. And it says Ibn Maryam. Right? So Ibn Maryam. So what's he doing here? Right? So, no. What it means when it says Isa ibn Maryam, What the Messenger of Allah also meant to say was, رَجُلٌ كَعِيسَى ibn Maryam. A man like Isa ibn Maryam, because he passed away. According to the Quran, they're saying he died on the cross, so he's going to be Isa ibn Maryam. So it's like Isa ibn Maryam. So it's like, right, so when that's okay. So the Messenger of Allah is trying to explain to you that a man is going to come like Isa ibn Maryam when the Christians already believe that he's going to come. So to make matters more confusing, we're going to also accept that he's going to come, but wink, wink, it's going to be like him. But I'm not going to say like him.
Yeah.
You're only going to find that out 1200 years later.
When he comes.
When he actually comes, it's going to be this Indian dude.
Yeah.
Right? That's the idea, right?
Yeah.
Am I getting wrong?
Yeah, that's right.
Right? So Christians are believing he's going to come back. So the Messenger of Allah gives into that aqidah by pushing it, saying, he's going to come back. Right? But secretly, it's not him actually.
Someone else.
It's going to be someone who's like him.
From India.
From India. And his mum's not going to be Maryam.
No.
Yeah? His mom's going to be Maryam. And he's going to finish Christianity, but Christianity is still here. Right? There's no need to refute. It's that, how can I explain that to someone who's not already indoctrinated by Qadiyanis, just an average person? If you are accepting that as an aqidah, you've got other issues going on.
Yeah.
Right? But that being said, there were people that were indoctrinated with these ideas. Because the idea usually comes, because what they will do is, you focus on stuff around the idea.
Yeah.
So what you focus on is, Isa alayhi salam died, didn't he? Inni mutawaffika. Does that mean that he died? So if Isa alayhi salam's dead, didn't Isa alayhi salam die? And then you have to say, what does tawaffa mean? So the whole debate will be around that. Let's say you're right. Right? The Quran does say he died. Let's accept it for argument's sake. You're right, he died. Okay, that's what you're claiming. He passed away. He doesn't say about Kashmir being buried there, which is mainstream Qadiyan belief, but okay. You say that. Where does that prove in the Quran?
Exactly.
All that does is you say that he passed away. And if he has passed away, and then the Messenger of Allah says he's going to come back, isn't that possible? Cannot Allah resend someone back? Meaning, all you've done, you've questioned the aqidah of us, which the Quran is very clear, that Isa didn't die. But you want to put a question mark on that. But how does that justify this?
Exactly. Which has no mention at all.
Yeah,
or no
relation to that at all.
Exactly.
Right? If I've come to you and said, you know, that mic that you're using, your laptop you're using, that's stolen. I want to debate you about that. And when I win the debate, it will show you that I'm a Nabi. Right? You'll be like, even if you do win the debate, how does that prove my nubuwwah? No, is that fair, right? So if you prove that he passed away, where does he come into the picture?
Exactly. That guy from India.
Yeah, the guy. I know I'm pushing India too much, but I'm just saying, like, it's so random. That's
it's so far away.
Yeah, like, if someone's the haram somewhere, like, you can get behind the idea, right? You get like haram, and people have that random guy in India, right? And he's claiming nubuwwah or messiahship and random theories, and people buying it. So, despite the ridiculousness of the idea, unfortunately, he got a significant following. Yeah, it comes with charisma, right? Finance. And then affluent people joined the party, and people got behind the idea. Even today, people got behind the idea. And so many ulama wrote works regarding this. So amongst this work, which is so Mufti Yusuf Shabir, he's collected around 100 hadith, which just talk about Khatam al-Nubuwwah. Okay. Right? It's not 100 separate hadith. It's just 100 hadith. So sometimes one hadith can be different turuq. So it's separate. So it's not literally 100. Okay. And then he's also got taqreer done by various ulama, such as the Qadi Qudat of Afghanistan, Abdul Hakim Haqqani, Mufti Abu al-Qasim al-Nu'mani, and others. They've written an introduction for it. So although he's not in this book, Mufti Shafi is, but although Mufti Shafi is not refuting Qadiani belief, but he mentions that he went and he saw Qadiani influence, so he wanted to kind of pen this collection, like his contribution to that. Yeah. So in that sense, it's a useful work. So if you're like looking for material, there are other material, but this is quite up to date. Yeah. So he's going to use previous material. This is going to summarize it together. It's got hukm wa hadith, or what earlier scholars have said. So it's very nice print, Maktab Ismail, right? Very nice print, easy to follow. It actually starts with his risala, although it starts with the name on top and then it's at the bottom. The risala Yusuf Shabir's risala first with the taqreer, and then Mufti, which is around page 124 pages. And then from 125th page, you have Mufti Shafi Rahmatullah Alayhi's Risala, which has a taqreez by Allama Anwar Shāh al-Kashmīrī. Mufti Azizur Rahman Uthmani, who's the Mufti of Darul Duban. And then Shaykh Muhammad Ali and others have done taqreez of this. And so that book, he's typed that up very nicely, which is easy to follow. And it's well worth a read. Put all the narrations together and provided that just to push the point home about Khatm al-Nubuwwah. Right, that's the idea. So this is why Khatm al-Nubuwwah became such a major effort amongst the ulama across the board, not just Deobandi scholars, Brelvis, the Hadith, the scholars in the subcontinent. Khatm al-Nubuwwah became something that they united around. And various scholars have written books. The Deobandi scholars wrote a number of books in Urdu, Arabic. I think one of the interesting taqreers written to Mali Shabir's work was saying that you should try to work on something like in English as well, just so that you can kind of nip it in the bud. So there have been, I haven't watched them, but I've seen like clips, like what do you call them, thumbnails of like Qadiani debates, etc., which is ongoing, which is good. So this is a book which I don't think many Qadianis who know Arabic are going to sit and read it, but for us it's beneficial just so we can kind of be aware of the relevant narrations. So if you come up with a task, you're kind of aware of it. Because what normally happens is that groups like Qadianis, groups like, or any fringe groups, like
play on ignorance.
Yeah, so they learn arguments, isn't it? Yeah. So like when we're teaching a lesson, we don't teach you how to debate. Yeah. We don't say, okay, this guy doesn't say this, say this. Some people may have that, but as an institution, we don't do that. Whereas these groups, they kind of facilitate, they form themselves on that because they work on these fringe ideas.
And that's their identity.
Yeah, it's the identities around these ideas. So therefore, what happens is when they're debating, so when they come to you, even like the lay random uncle in the group, they'll have...
But did you know?
Yeah, there was like Bukhari. I remember there used to be a guy many years ago in our school with a Shi'i background, right? The Shi'i, not practicing, in the Quran, but I remember he'd come in and say, but in Sahih Bukhari says Allah has feet, right? So he memorized that because his Shaykh told him that, right? Whereas you're not going to, and that we like average, but we don't sit in our majlis and say, Usul al-Kafi says this. We have the odd scholar, but we're not, because we're comfortable in our views, and then we kind of push it. Because we're not constantly, our belief is not constantly at odds with mainstream Islam. So we're not constantly trying to defend ourselves. We kind of feel comfortable with it. So we're not like, trying to find Imam in the Quran or trying to find our views desperate in the Quran. We're okay with it. We're comfortable with it. Alhamdulillah. So anyway, that's been very long.
It's been very long.
All right.
That's been very enjoyable.
The reviews of these books, inshallah. I would advise people to go and, purchase these books, make dua for these authors. Right. And Allah accept their efforts, and any shortcoming that are in those books. I'm going to see anything you can ask, you can tell me, I can tell them, you can advise them for better, etc. You can see any shortcoming I say, you're more than happy, more welcome to rectify that. Inshallah. Anything I'm missing? Any points?
I think all I would add here is please like, share, comment, subscribe, engage with these kind of videos and this kind of content. We want to, inshallah, try and benefit as many people as we can on all fronts. And the more that people who resonate with this kind of content share it and like and subscribe and engage with it and discuss it, whether by way of discussing it in their own private gatherings, online, or in the comment section, then inshallah it can provide a lot of fruits for everyone. So please do engage with the content, and inshallah we're going to post up all the links of the things that we have referenced and the things that we have referred to, especially the previous episodes and the works that we've discussed, as well as the Telegram channel, which Dr. Maulana has mentioned that he's going to be sharing things on there. So it'll be worth your while, if you have Telegram. If you don't, then download it and then join. But if you have Telegram, to join the Telegram channel, inshallah, where you can get updates as well. And you can learn a lot more, which things that we may not actually be able to discuss in the episodes. Barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.